Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July BET meeting. We'd start with a salute to the flag of our country. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. Good to see everybody here. Summer is moving along. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Blankley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that we bring forward the presentation of the IT director ahead of other business items this evening.
Second. I have a motion to amend the agenda to move one of our items in our number 10 up to now. It's been seconded. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Blankley, what do we have?
For the first time, Mr. Chairman, in quite some time, if ever, I'm told, we have a presentation from our IT director. I'm pleased to report that I was part of the First Selectmen's special committee that vetted candidates for this job, and Tom was our chosen candidate. Tom Klein has now been in the job for 3-4 months, is it, Tom?
3 months.
3 months, all right. And it seemed appropriate that some little time should be given to the new IT director to get his feet under the table and see what he really had here, apart from all the things he might have been told by any of us or Mr. Crary. So here he is, and rather than have me as any kind of intermediary between this board and the IT department in my capacity as liaison with IT, it seemed to me most appropriate that we should hear directly from Tom himself. So this is an opportunity for Tom to give us his view on what he sees so far and give us a little bit of a picture of how things might be in the future, an opportunity for us to give him feedback on what we think about things. So I think this is a very exciting time because IT, as we know, in any organization is an absolutely crucial part of management and organization. And I think it's a very good time now for us to hear about IT in the town of Greenwich. Over to you, Tom.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, John. And thank you to the board for allowing me this opportunity. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully you can hear me. And it's been a privilege to be in this position. It's been 90 days and maybe a few from there on. But again, so you should have a packet, minus all my writing here. And I'll just, these are some 16 slides. I wanted to just jot down some of my thoughts over the first 90 days. And so if you go to the first page, just, what have I done over the first 90 days? Lots of things, but these are sort of the highlights that I kind of made it my business to go out and meet department heads. So that's whether it's public works or police or social services or health or tax collector or assessor, planning and zoning, and so forth. I sat down for at least an hour, sometimes several hours, and just listened to what the department is doing, what are their concerns, what worked, what do they like about IT, what don't they like about IT. What is it that I could change, and some themes started to arrive. And so I'll get to that next. But and I've also met with the staff. I made it a point to meet with each individual for at least an hour, and I've kind of said, here's the questions I'm going to ask, so you don't think I'm going to ask anything strange. And they came, and I had great conversations with all of them, and then I did the same thing with the vendors and the police department and Board of Ed, a library, and some tech leaders from other towns as well. So I really just try to reach out, and for me this is really fact-finding. So if you go to the next page, the common themes I've heard is that the departments, I think overall, are happy with the core of what IT provides. And really this presentation is going to be about that, if we talk about capabilities and needs, is that IT is structured right now. It's very capable for the level of service it provides, but the needs of the town are greater than that. And so that's really what I want to, if I present kind of one thing, that's what I want you to understand, that there is a gap, and I'll go through that in the next 10 minutes or so. So the gap is this: the departments want end-to-end technology. So each department wants IT to understand exactly what it does, what its problems are, how it works, what's the workflow, and help it come up with a solution to make them more productive. But the IT department itself is limited to really being a liaison between vendors that the departments might bring in and really being the technical interface. So they're very good at doing installs and upgrades and backups and data transfers. And as we go along, I think this will start to gel why this is the case. But really higher level services such as project management and business analysts and workflow are really things that are not performed by IT but are performed by vendors. So as we play out that theme, and I kept listening to departments, you hear that they want, for example, a way to collaborate mobily. So, for example, if the health department would want to have an iPad and go out and when they visit a restaurant for a health check, they want to be able to write it in their iPad and have a report and have it automatically update. So it sounds like I'm talking a story about, well, let's give iPads to everybody. But as I go through this, it's more than that. It's how does that system connect with another system? And that takes kind of a bunch of positions in IT that simply don't exist right now. So heard the same thing with mobile devices, accessing files remotely. Lots of that. Boards and commissions wanting central sharing repositories. And then overall dissatisfaction with email. I heard that one loud and clear. So holding all that for a second and just looking at the next page with the macro trends. So what I'm seeing, and I think we're all seeing this in technology, is more vendors are offering cloud solutions. So they're offering, hey, buy our system, we'll run it. You don't have to run it here, we'll run it in the cloud. And I think we're all experiencing increased mobile devices, lots more use of social media by the residents. We're going to see soon voice over IP phones, and we can talk about that if you want. And really, IT organizations in general, outside of the town, but in general, are taking on higher level services such as project management, business analysis, workflow architecture, data integration. So I'll stop and I'll just tell you a little bit about IT by the numbers. I know that you're all financial folks and that you're like numbers, so I figure I'd give you all a mental break and let you look through some numbers. So this is really, well, what does IT do right now? And we support a lot of devices. I like to say devices and not workstations because I think we're getting to a point where it's not about just supporting computers. It's about supporting what we're going to see is supporting somebody's computer on their desktop and a very intelligent phone next to it and a mobile device. And so I think we're have the same amount of employees. I think we're going to see a doubling and perhaps a tripling of the devices that IT is going to have to support over the next several years. So, as I said, there's workstations, there's iPhones, there's iPads, there's lots of printers, decent amount of scanners, and some projectors. All of these have to be maintained and supported. There's a network, 27 physical servers, and then when I talk about 59 virtual servers, what that really means is each server has little worlds of other servers within those servers. And all of those have to be supported. Lots of switches and routers and across 27 sites in our entire town network. Again, we have a lot of general purpose applications and a lot of departmental specific applications. Again, I would say that there's about 4.3 help desk staff. I like to say not 4, but 4.3 when you count in vacations and you know, there's very rare times when there's actual 4 people there all the time, whether somebody's sick or on vacation. And about 600 help desk tickets per month. Okay, so a little bit more about the breakdown of the help desk. Here's the pie chart, just to give you a sense of, well, what are the issues all about? What do people call for? And network issues are big. General software issues, some passwords, some website requests, putting up content, so forth, but just something that you'd want to have. Something important, and I want to tell you about it now because it'll come back in a moment, but the key to supporting that many workstations is standards. And that means that the 740 workstations are pretty much all the same. So they have the same, by and large, version of Windows, the same software on it. When you open up the Start menu and you look around for applications, they're all in the same place. So it's what's called a standard build. And technicians also can use something called PC Anywhere. So if there's a problem, they can get to it. So I guess my point is that these workstations, each one's not a mystery when there's a problem. If there's a problem, most likely other computers are having the same problem. So it's all about standards. Mobile, we've seemed to standardize on iPhones and iPads, and that has been described to me as a gray area, meaning, well, we don't exactly support it. And I want to make that more permanent. So just going on is I want you to know that I want to take ownership of those and put in software like a mobile device management system and just take it on like I would workstations. But it's going to take a while. But I just want you to know that that's coming. The budget. Now there's many, many ways to slice it, so I'll just give you this pie chart. I just made a very basic one just to know it's a little over a third of staff. There's a big chunk of the budget for network, and then the other piece is software. A quarter of it for software, and there's computers. But that's how the budget breaks down. I would say it's almost all waterline, meaning that it's all there supporting what's in place now. Current staff. So there's me. There's an office assistant who helps with organizing bills and figuring out who needs to get paid and what contracts. And she's a tremendous help. We have a help desk manager, 3 network engineers, 2 application support specialists, 1 GIS manager, and a GIS analyst. So that's the staff. On to the next chart. This is the one that is the most complicated one I'm going to show you, but it's in order to truly understand where we are as an IT group and where we need to go and where the gaps are, I just want you to take a look at this chart for a moment. So it's an inverted pyramid, and it's really showing you that technology is layers and that each one depends on the next one. So up top is the thing you're all interested in, and that is the solution, right? Those are the things of, hey, give me a way to have social services, have an automated system when somebody calls in, they can organize it and be very efficient and share information. And these are the large solutions that you want. And in order to accomplish them, they all break down. All of these things have to happen in technology to make it work. The other piece is as you go up, you will hopefully see how I've kind of segmented each line. So just little segments to really show you that in the lower levels, there's one network. There's a bunch of file servers that are more or less configured the same way. There's workstations, printers. These are all standard across the entire town. Email, same way. OS, things like Active Directory. And then you get into these general purpose applications, print Word. They're all the same until you get to then these packaged applications. And these are all different. Munis is very different than CityView or Lucidity. And these are systems that when something goes wrong with them or to make them work effectively, you have to be completely, thoroughly knowledgeable about each one of these systems. And so the breadth of it widens out, and you really have to understand these. On the right-hand side of that chart, you will see that these are generally the types of jobs in IT that people are put in place to serve those layers. So, for example, project managers handle project management. And you can see how it all kind of breaks down. So this is, again, the bottom half is covered. Right? These are the positions that we have in IT right now. We have a strong network. We have good file servers. We have workstations. And the gaps start to come in where the departments want the solutions on the top. There's not the positions in the middle to support those layers, and that's where the gap is. So this is the theme I'm trying to bring across. Next page, I'll just talk about the gaps. So the IT staff is very skilled, and they're network analysts. They know how to support desktops, but they're not staffed to offer or recommend complete end-to-end solutions for departments. There's really no capacity in IT for project management. So, for example, the ADP project is not being project managed within IT. Voice over IP will not be project managed within IT, simply because there is no project manager. Business analysts in workflow, so there's not somebody who's skilled at saying, let's look at every department, understand the information they're passing, understand the workflow, who's involved, who passes what information. So coming up with ideas about, well, how do we get it so a resident can submit, for instance, a request to put a new addition onto their house, submit it on a system, and have that application be passed around between departments automatically, and have the resident be able to track it, right? I mean, I think that's sort of something that most people would say, yes, we would want that. In order to do that, the amount of data integration and business analysis is really beyond the capabilities of IT right now. So we can get there, but that requires a good amount of work, and either vendors have to come up and fill that gap, or we need to talk about positions in the future. Let's see. So commissions and boards. So in order to support the commissions and board, this is what I was talking about before with standards. So every town-owned computer pretty much works the same way as every other town-owned computer. When you get into boards and commissions, well, they have their own computer. And I know when I go to my neighbor's house and I look at their computer, everybody's got a different computer. Some might be 3 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. They might be running different operating systems. And so to say, well, let's support email for all the boards and commissions requires something more than just say, okay, we're going to support it. It needs some amount of standardization. So, for example, to say, okay, we can support email for boards and commissions, but only on an iPad or only on an iPhone, and kind of draw that line. But and then to do that, we are now increasing the amount of devices we're supporting, and so we're going to tap the capabilities of a very small IT group to do that. So I just, again, bringing these things up. The last two notes is to say, before I take you to the next page and I show you these gaps, there is a GIS group that isn't the help desk, and they aren't network analysts, but they're very skilled in geographical information. And I think it's a very important thing, and I think that over the next several years, we really do want to have many departments integrate through one source of record for geographical information. So, for example, to take documents about applications for permits and get those associated with one piece of property would be a goal that we could achieve. And the GIS group is a good place to start. Still need business analysts, workflow people, project managers to really make that happen. The other piece is the webmaster. She is great, and she does a lot of this kind of high-level work, but just for a small piece of it, which is the website. So the next page, and we are getting to the end, I promise. I have a few more. But really, that's what this looks like, where there's a gap. There are, and to the right-hand side, I just took the structure of the IT department, just put it to the side, and to try to show you what areas of the stack, of the technology value stack, that the current IT department supports. And you will see where it really kind of falls down is in this project management, business analyst, architecture area. So until we really fill these gaps, we're going to continue to depend on vendors to fill that, to bring in these types of people. And you'll see examples of that again with voice over IP, with ADP, where that happens now. Next one, I'll just take you through just to talk about the network a little bit. So 27 sites. Here's a list of the sites. We're going to add a few more with ADP. The next piece is that, well, certainly the network we know is supported by LightPath. There are 3 projects that you should know about that impact or give us an opportunity to rethink how we're doing our network. That's Voice over IP, and that's 2 capital improvement plans that were submitted last year before I got here. So, which is updating disaster recovery for IT and replacement of a main routing switch. Now, because Voice over IP depends entirely on the network, now we have more things dependent on the network. So, in the event of a disruption in the network right now, at least you would have phones. A year from now, you won't have phones either. So the importance of the network goes up, and the importance of how resilient it is goes up. So I want to make the capital disaster recovery plan a little bit more of how do we make the network more resilient in the event of a disaster, and less of how do we recover from a disaster. So as we're doing the Voice over IP project, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, do we have the right switches in place at each closet? Do we need to replace those? And like I said, we have some money to do that, so we will see how far we can get with what we have, do it that way. Winding down, so all of this, the title of this report was Capabilities and Needs, and we're getting to that point, which is sort of my conclusion is IT is effective at what it's designed to do right now, which is network infrastructure, desktop computers, email. We'll talk about email in a second, business applications, and just the basic business applications, meaning installing it, backing it up, making sure it's working. The GIS group's made some significant improvements over the years. I think it's got a lot of potential. The website is functional. There's certainly problems with the website, but some of those are the applications that are attached to the website, not so much the website itself. So, for example, to get a parking pass for train parking is not part of the website. You're actually taken to a different site. And the same thing with getting a beach pass is a different site. So sometimes when we think of the town network, there are other pieces that are not part of it, but you think of in terms that they're part of it. Some of the things we're doing with the network is we're going to have very shortly, by the end of this month, a Facebook page, town Facebook page. Very minor effort we're doing on this to just get the ball rolling, where we will take the same news feeds that go through the town now. So if you go on the Town of Greenwich website, and you look at the main page, you'll see news feeds from every department telling you what's going on. It could be 2 weeks ago it was fireworks. It could be what the police is doing. We're going to allow each department to also say, oh, do you want to post that to the town Facebook page? Or do you want to post it to the Twitter page? And so we're really taking the same message, the same workflow, and we are expanding the reach of all those messages. So you can be on Facebook as a resident, not go to the town website, and still hear about an activity. So, like I said, it's a fairly minor change, and we're doing that in 2 weeks. And let me see what else we have here. I guess that's it. The last page, these are the goals. The thing not on the goals that I feel is too much of a stretch goal, I've submitted it to the First Selectman as a stretch goal, in fact, is to replace the email system. I do want to replace the email system. I think the town departments want me to replace the email system. My concern is how absorbable that is right now with an ADP project going on and then a voice over IP project going on. So I'd like to see those 2 things done, the dust settle, and then work on replacing the email system. Because I think it's too many moving parts. So it's not in my goals for this coming up. It's a stretch. I'd at least like to get the ball started. So my goals for the year is assist on the ADP project as best we can, assist on the voice over IP, and you can read the rest. But the re-architecture of the municipal network is huge. In general, help departments become more efficient and just engage the departments. And talked about making the website a little bit more social friendly. The other piece I didn't mention is each of those news items on the town website will then have a share button, so you can share those on Facebook and Twitter and again, try to get it around the social ecosystem. I want to get a mobile device management software for the iPads and iPhones, and again, start owning these orphans and learning how to support them properly. And in fact, we're working with the Board of Ed to learn how do they do it with their iPads. So we're having a lot of good collaboration with the Board of Ed technology people as well. Other pieces is waterline maintenance. I think that's an important one to know, is that every system we put in, we are maintaining them. So even though we might be looking at new systems, we still have to support all those other systems in place. So that's pretty much all I have. I'm happy to answer questions. Maybe I didn't hit on everything. And
We're orphans. We know what it's like to be orphans with iPads.
yeah, and I know that as well. And that is certainly one of my goals. Is I want to start. So I know that there's a duality of email systems. There's the town email system, and then there's the one for the boards and the commissions, and that's not working so well. And I've spent lots of time with that vendor who's supporting it. So it is my intention to bring those over to the real town email system, and that's just a matter of how fast we can do it. And it's really a matter of how fast you're comfortable doing that. Because if I did that today, your email would stop working. Because we'd have to reconfigure your iPhones and your iPads to get it to have it get email from a new place.
So we should give you dates.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a matter of coordination. It's less of a technical thing and more of a coordination thing. So again, I do want to do that. And after that, I'd like to start thinking about email in the cloud. So more to come on that. We're really in early stages. I have an appointment with Joan Sullivan to start talking about how we might approach a project like this, but I would like to see us get off the Lotus Notes.
Mr. Johnson?
Tom, thank you. This has been great. Very, very educational for all of us. Overall, how would you grade the town of Greenwich for IT services versus other comparable communities in Connecticut, such as Fairfield, Stamford, Darien? For those you might be familiar with.
Yeah, and I'm not.
And the second part of that is also from a staffing standpoint. You've got, I guess, 11 people in your department, maybe. Just curious how that compares to other.
My sense is, and I've had brief conversations with the IT people from Stamford and Norwalk, and I've had an opportunity to go up and there's some user group meetings where all the IT directors from various towns get together, and the themes do seem to be very network oriented. They're like the meeting I went to talked about what's the best strategy for Wi-Fi, and so I don't see the town of Greenwich IT any different than the other towns where their main focus is the network, and it's an important piece. And I'm not here to say that focus should go away. I'm here to say that focus needs to be here. You need those layers. It's just that in order to deliver those higher level services, we need sort of higher level IT people. It's not a matter of like retraining the network engineer to become a project manager, because that network engineer needs to stay in place. So that's what I've noticed with the towns. They all seem to have the same types of very network-centric types of IT, and it's needed. But as an IT department matures, that's when these new positions need to get plugged in. And so I would just say, I think I would give it a good grade. It's just on the maturity model. It's got room to grow.
Yep. Question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Tom, welcome. Thank you for your presentation. My question is about our 311 system. And for those who may not be familiar, a couple years ago, the town appropriated funds to try to roll out a 311 system, which is a terrific interface with the public to report a pothole or a downed tree and to track the town's response. And so I think department heads were excited to have more data to be able to allocate their manpower and their assets more efficiently. But I think it's taken longer than expected. So my question is, I guess, twofold. Would that benefit from a project manager? You've mentioned here already that that's probably an area where we're missing capability. And number two, is this something that's high up in your portfolio of work, or not so high?
I think it's important. That's an illustration of a solution, right? And that is where I think we'd all like to, and myself included, I'm a resident, I would like to get to a point where I can open up an app, public stuff, and say, I've noticed something, can it be fixed? And it gets routed to the right place. But I think it's important that it gets routed in a way that's natural for the departments to handle it and to collaborate on it. And those systems, those back-end systems, have never been in place. It's to be very efficient. Each department does have their own method and way of doing things, but they don't necessarily have a good way of collaborating with each other. And I think that to put in public stuff and just kind of say we're going to install it and make it work without taking care of those back-end things is like, I've used this illustration before, it's like taking a brand new BMW dashboard and putting it on a 1963 Ford pickup and saying, why doesn't the radar work and why doesn't the cruise control work? And why aren't all these things working? It's because the systems simply don't have a way to handle those. They're not being used that way. So it's, the public stuff is sort of a symptom of the efficiency that really has to be made town-wide in all the systems.
That'll wait for a little while until we improve the back end that you're talking about?
I think it's not so much a back end technology thing. It's a workflow. So in other words, what I would like to see is, and it sounds like some of this work was done, but to understand, for instance, take some use cases about, let's just walk through one. What would happen if a resident had a question about something? Well, how would that go in? How would you figure out what department to send it to? What would that department do with it? And how does it get answered? How does it go back? And then once we understand the workflow, what systems do we have in place? Do we have all the systems to support that? If not, what do we need to get it done? What changes do we have to make? And I think we have some holes right now. I mean, we have some good systems. Lucidity is a good system. Parks and Rec have some good systems, and City View has some challenges. It's been adopted by some groups and not so much from others. And I'd like to see that in either getting that in place or looking at, is City View really the right thing for us? And I wouldn't say start from scratch, but take a step back and say, okay, maybe what we wanted to do was good, but this is the right piece of software for it. Mm-hmm. But it's those things that kind of try to come in with public stuff and do it without the right back-end systems is, I'm kind of not surprised where it is.
Okay.
Nancy, question?
Tom, you have a lot on your plate, I know. Certainly Internet security has been an issue in the corporate world. As you assess the Greenwich systems, is that an area where you think will require more investment, or what's your perspective at this point?
I think so. So what's happened is there's a company called Bat Blue, and don't worry, I hadn't heard of them before we got here, but I had met with them, and they are very competent. So we have, like most IT departments, we have a firewall, and we count on these Bat Blue technicians to keep up on all the security. So in a sense, we've outsourced that, and it's been that way. And they're a competent group, and they maintain the firewall. I think they would like to take it a step farther and say, well, why don't you just let us put the firewall on the cloud, and we can put in more services and more. They've really made the case that we're beyond just having a firewall now. You need more, and they're making a very compelling case, and I would probably come back and suggest something. That might be part of the overall resiliency of the network that we talked about. Just, as I talked about the three projects that kind of, if you put together, kind of equal that. So, but yeah, that is something, and I'd like to take advantage of that relationship we already have.
Mr. Norton?
Tom, I want to thank you very much for your presentation, but could, for a couple of seconds at least, focus on your fundamental gaps in which you have 6 bullet points. And it seems to me that there's a constant reference here to both staff and skill set. So if I read this correctly, that the deficiencies are addressed there. Are there alternatives in use of other maybe options to maybe fill some of those?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the way they get filled now, because two things happen, is either we get a vendor to do it, or the project doesn't get done, or it doesn't get done well. But somewhere it falls off the plate for for those reasons. So, we could keep bringing in vendors, and when we bring in a vendor, make sure we have a project manager, which ADP is like that, and the voice over IP project will be the same way. We want a project manager. We want an analyst, or want somebody to go through workflow, which happens now with ADP because I'm heavily into that project. But I think sometimes these vendors reach out and expect someone from the town to also be there and say, can you tell us more about the data or the workflow or how this is getting done? And they often don't find a partner on the other side. So I think, some of it can be outsourced, but it's the issue gets to be that we bring in a vendor to understand how the town works, and they finish the project and they walk out the door, and then we don't have that knowledge, and then somebody else comes along and they need to learn how the town works and for their particular project. So, I think it would be more beneficial if we had people that it was their job to really understand the interconnections of all the systems and how they work. And I don't mean on network level, I mean on these higher levels of real information and tables and so for example, and just to try to give you an example for this is when you think of Munis, you think of it as there's numbers in there. And they mean something to you. But when a network person or a help desk person thinks of Munis, they think of it as something that has data on it, and it needs to be supported and run and back up. But they don't really know what that data is. And as you get into these positions that I'm talking about, they understand what that information is and how it needs to connect with other systems.
Mr. Drake?
Yeah, real quick comment. Thank you very much for all that you've done here. It's very productive and informative to us. I've given particular comfort by seeing your first goal, which is to assist with the ADP project. From our point of view as a finance board, that was a significant investment in modernizing some tools and some processes, and I think it's a big opportunity to get the benefits for which we paid. Perhaps Mark and Nancy would confirm that, but I think bringing that project to a successful conclusion is important.
Yeah, and Nancy can attest to, because she's seen me at meetings where I'm very involved in it.
We're glad
I was going to say, just to comment there, I know my last steering committee that I attended on ADP, they sort of said we would not have moved to where we were without Tom. So, his assistance, I think, has been invaluable getting us to where we are, and I'm sure getting us to go live in October, a big debt will be due to you.
Yeah, high priority. Good.
I want to say thank you, and I would say that this was one of the first boards to reach out with some taste for IT and communicating and getting our documents ordered, and I think you're very welcome by the town. I've heard the chatter, and everybody's really excited and blessed. Boy, we're really looking forward to using technology and making some changes and getting things going. It's been a difficult road to pass, but I think everybody's really excited, and I'm really appreciative for you coming here tonight and visiting with us.
Yeah, and same here. I'm very happy, and it's a journey, and we will get there.
Bill and I had a meet with Tom over some of our posting of the minutes, and I knew that day. I said, "Boy, the town did a good job." I was really proud that day of the town for bringing you on.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Blankley, thank you. Back to our regular agenda. We don't have any other guests here. I will call on our clerk for our routine applications of the evening.
And I'll introduce them, all four of them, and put them on the floor for discussion and action. The first one is FD4. An application from the fire department for $87,650, which is an item of transfer of salaries from last year. The second one is Finance 1, $434,542 item, which is project closeouts. The third one is HD1 From the Health Department, $54,927, which is approval to use part-time salaries and benefits. And the fourth one is CD1 from the Community Development Department, $105,445.79, which is a transfer of excess funds from prior years.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second those four applications and just note that the first one, FD4, is actually for fiscal year 2014, kind of a housekeeping item there.
Okay, yes, on that item, that was the one we approved in May, but they just sort of changed their mind on what MOC they wanted it out of. So that one's been previously approved, but this is the correct account number. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. Our non-routine, I will call on Mr. Johnson to move that item.
Mr. Chairman, the first item is ED7, which I should note was formerly known as ED2, but since it falls into the recently completed fiscal year 14, we renamed it ED7. This is $25,000 transfer of temporary salaries. Second, and I'll give a
From the
report.
school lunch fund, correct?
Yeah, do you want me to give a report and then?
No.
or a second?
So the item's been moved on behalf of the Budget Committee. Do I have okay, committee reports, Mr. Johnson?
ED7, as mentioned, is a transfer of temporary salaries. This transfer was needed to account for a shortfall in the food service temporary salaries line incurred in fiscal year 14, primarily due to family leave absences. It was covered by savings from the food budget. The Budget Committee did discuss this and approve this transfer. I do need to note that it gave rise to a discussion on the Board of Ed's recent decision to opt out of the federal school lunch program for the high school. The Budget Committee was concerned that this action occurred without prior notice to the BET and involves a school lunch revolving fund. Now, this revolving fund, which is a break-even account, theoretically, I'll note that in the fiscal year 15 budget, there's approximately $300,000 taken out of the general fund to cover shortfalls. So this is certainly an item that the Budget Committee has a lot of interest and concern about, and we'll certainly be revisiting this school lunch fund later on in this current fiscal year, and especially as we get into next year's budget process. The committee did vote 4-0 to approve this transfer.
Discussion on the item? So, I know this was brought up, and I welcome Board Member Jennifer Dayton and Superintendent of Schools Dr. McCursey. So, this item is leads into several discussions. It's been about 4 or 5 years now that we've been having to zero out the school lunch fund at the end of the year because its revenues are not meeting its appropriations. Now this project comes along and what we have is we're transferring it because we have absences and temporary salaries and then that just brought along what we saw actually in the newspaper about the discontinuing of taking the state grant. I think my primary goal on this transfer is to highlight that it's time we come up with a plan and a strategy so we're not chasing an account. It's very difficult at the end of the year, closing out a year, to have an account with a negative balance per se. In the case of the grant from the state, whatever food you have, and I think I said it at Budget Committee, I think your customers like your decision. I think it's just from a finance board point of view. We have to stay within the spending of our accounts, and we have to find a strategy which we get the school lunch fund, because as you've seen the creep from the original $114,000 when I was chair of the Budget Committee, we're now looking at, I don't really know what the effects are going to be. I was going to ask Roland if in September we could sort of have a new sort of school revolving fund lunch appropriation statement and where it's at and what it looks like. But we're approaching $400,000. I mean, that's a real number. That's to say that the school lunch fund is off by that number. Now, I also want to at the same time say that the school revolving lunch fund at one time had a staff of 25. It's now about half of that. And the school lunch fund has also been one of the departments that we've sort of allocated the fixed charges to. So in all fairness to the Board of Ed, I want to be fair here. There's been change, but I think it's time we now take all of those changes and put them in one basket and see what we're really going to need to do going forward to keep this, so we don't end up, because what we're doing is we're doing it in this budget, we're actually cleaning up last budget. So I'd rather it be in the same budget. Further, Ms. Tarkington?
Yeah, I would just like to add that in this budget, we anticipated that the contribution from the town would be $123,000, and we did discuss this in the Budget Committee, because of the losses that weren't planned, et cetera, that number is more like $355,000. So that's a substantial difference from plan, and, at minimum, it would have been helpful to the Budget Committee and the BET if you had come in advance of the end of the fiscal year to advise us of this change, in the course of your business, rather than after the fiscal year having closed, because that can make a difference to, how we manage the year-end books.
Further discussion? Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Goldberg.
We're still on this, the nutrition program apropos of this. Is what we're talking about? Is that when you want to discuss it?
I just brought that up, that we don't know exactly what the decision to not take the state funds were. Dr. McChrist, please.
I'll be brief, but these are excellent points. And I did see in the supporting material you had the Greenwich Time article, and with all due respect, we should get you the backup material that the team put together for this, because a key consideration, the administration brought forward the recommendation to stay in the program, but say we could potentially put at risk the $1.3 million in sales that we have, because by the new regulations that have come down from the state and the feds, that's 92% of all of the cash sales. Any of that food would be in question as to whether we could continue to serve it. So there was a 5-page set of analysis that Ben Branyan and John Hopkins brought to the board, because as Mike, you've mentioned, a lot of consternation among students and staff. We were worried about, yes, we were potentially having the board vote on losing $221,000, but we were putting at risk $1.3 million because of 93% of that food service, we could no longer serve that type of food. So with that, so the known loss was $218,000, but the unknown effect was on the $1.3 million. So we agree completely with you, Mike, that Mr. Mason, we need to have a plan now. We've gone into that full speed. We're prepared to come back. I know you spoke with Mr. Branyan about a September report. That's a little early, but we could come back as early as October or November and be very close with all of you, and I hear your points, Mr. Tarkington, be very close with you about this new era, because the market has now worked. By stepping away from the public program, we now got to get our market system working. But to be very clear, the board saw that $1.3 million in sales was potentially at risk because 93% of that food would no longer be eligible to be served under the new federal regulations that came in just this last year. So I want to be clear on that was part of the calculus. Known loss versus unknown. Right. And then we want to work very closely with you on this, because we're about to return again about close to $2 million to the town on our overall budget. So we work really hard to be cost-effective, efficient, and bring back money to the town. Food service has been a challenge. We've got to figure this one out.
Do you think that the kids just aren't buying lunch, or what do you think the reasoning is?
Well, what they are buying would have then been potentially not servable if we'd gone into this program. That $1.3 million, and this was laid out in the memo to the board, which we can get to all of you so you have it, by Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Branyan. That food they're buying. We need to increase then what more they'll buy so we can close that gap and operate neutral. But again, the board said known loss of the federal and state money of the 218, but we're not sure the effect on that 1.3, because again, 93% of what was served there we could no longer serve by state and federal regulation. It gets into nutrition issues and all the rest. We are very committed to serving healthy food that's good and appropriate for all of our children. But we also had to say, what are we putting at risk? We have to figure out the demand and get much sharper then on balancing this definite but small shortfall. Hope this helped.
No, it does. It definitely does. Mr. Goldberg?
Sure. I read your supporting material. I watched the video of the discussion. I have to say, I think the Board of Ed made a mistake on this. What these standards were better nutritional standards that were national. And over 90% of school districts across the nation had already opted in. As you pointed out, it was the recommendation of the food services director, of the superintendent, that the school system opt in. So you're mentioning the $1.3 million in a la carte sales. Basically, you're saying that you think that substituting nutritious foods, whole grains, and so on, would cause this to dramatically drop. But in eliminating this funding, which is $218,000 in total from the federal side, plus by not opting in, you don't get a nutrition certificate from the state of Connecticut. So that's another $47,000. You give up the equivalent of a quarter of that a la carte menu sales anyway. You're talking about over $1 million in 4 years. And trying to get information and understand this decision, I reached out to Rosa DeLaro's office, who is on the Agriculture Committee of the U.S. Congress and one of the champions in improving school nutrition. Got a call back from Congresswoman DeLaro, who said that she thought that the decision by the Greenwich Board of Ed was very disappointing. Very sad was her words. She thought that the school system put the sales of a la carte items ahead of the nutrition and health of the students of the school system. She wondered why the school system had not reached out to the USDA, because as she put it, the USDA is bending over backwards to help school systems comply with these new standards. And again, I point out that John Hopkins said he could do this. And also, I would point out that there are celebrity chefs going around the country teaching school services directors how to do this. Jamie Oliver, some of you are a little on the older side, know of from the Naked Chef fame. He wore clothes, but he was doing simple, nutritious foods, and he's been going around the country on a crusade, helping school food services to comply with these. Tom Colicchio from Top Chef have also teamed up with Rosa DeLaro. One of the arguments from the Board of Ed was that philosophically they have a problem with taking away choice from the students in the school system, in the high school in particular, which I don't understand, because we take choices away from teenagers all the time. Whether it's foods, what we serve them at home, what we buy, what we don't allow them to purchase in terms of cigarettes and booze and drive cars, we take choices away all the time. And as Congresswoman DeLaro pointed out, she has grandkids who I take it are teenagers, and she said if she were to give them the choice of what to eat, they'd have cake and ice cream 3 meals a day. So I think given that your administration said you could do this, there are resources available, but you just gave up over $250,000. Now, the last point you mentioned about, a Greenwich solution to this, but I have to believe that the physiology of a 16-year-old in Greenwich is the same as the physiology of a 16-year-old in Des Moines, Iowa, or Minnesota, or San Jose, California. It doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel here. Again, these are national standards. And the reason there is pushback on this to begin with is that it's cutting into the profits of processed food makers and some professional caterers who have taken over school food services and are going to see their profits go down because they have to serve more fresh vegetables and whole grains. So if we put the nutrition and health of kids first, I don't mind if some of the sales go down, although I think the experience from California was that the kids would not eat it to begin with, but then they got used to it. And the other argument was that, the student athletes would have less calories and this would disadvantage them in some way. If I'm a coach, I'm saying, guys, this is what you're supposed to eat. This is no empty calories, no fat, less sodium. This makes you a better athlete. And if they're eating it, the rest of the kids are going to get the idea from that. So I'm disappointed that you didn't come to this board, which is now representing taxpayers who are now over $250,000 in the hole for this year, and thought through this more thoroughly, because the decision's been made. We've lost that. We can only opt in next, July, I think it is. So that's my 2 cents. But I think I would not like to see us lose out on another $250,000 next year on this.
Okay. Okay. Nancy Weissler?
Just one quick comment. Additionally, I mean, I think we're all concerned about funding, this to the neighborhood of $300,000, $500,000. Bill, you mentioned you're going to be looking at this very hard in terms of trying to figure out what you can do strategically. Will one of those options, and I don't know anything about that, be considering outsourcing down the road? I mean, I know a lot of corporations do it, and is that a possibility?
Conceivably, I mean, as the chair mentioned, we've gotten more efficient in our staffing. We're very confident in this operation run by Ben Brannion. He has great success in all these areas. John Hopkins is the immediate director in that area, is very highly effective. We are completely committed to nutrition and the health of our, we keep winning the top athletic awards around. We also are not the only Fairfield County district to opt out of this. Fairfield County opted in. A lot of the others have opted out. So again, 92, 93% nationally may be different in this county. But we are very committed to the health of our students. And I think we could very much look at down the road, does bringing in an outside firm help? Fairfield County does that. Excuse me, not Fairfield County. Fairfield Public School does that. So we may look at that. But we have to close this financial gap, and we're going to look at a lot of options. It actually has energized the team that much more than it's been recently. But I hear the concerns, I hear the questions, but fundamentally we are about the health of our children. And so we also then have to be cost effective with them.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. Thank you. Thank you. One more. Let's see. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move ED1, Board of Education, for $96,417, a transfer of funds for rental of buildings and transportation of pupils.
Items been moved on behalf of the Budget Committee report.
Mr. Brannion appeared before the Budget Committee, explained the need for the the $96,417 is divided up into two different funds amounts. One is for $85,000 to rent the bank house, the center in Byram, to house the kindergarten classes for New Lebanon School. This would be funded from money available from a new position left open in the fiscal year 15 budget. The Budget Committee did express some concern that the Board of Ed did not alert us to this open item in their budget. And more so, I realize the Board of Ed's budget is approved in the fall, but we were kind of hoping that during the February budget hearings we would have heard more about this unfunded position. They did reduce, related to this, they reduced headcount but left open the salary amount. But we do hope to work together better next budgeting season to better understand some of these accounts and figure out where the funding levels are. The committee did vote 4-0 to approve this transfer of the $85,000. The $11,417 was transferred from professional and other services account to fund transportation of students during summer school as part of their efforts to close the achievement gap. The committee voted 4-0 to approve the transfer for the full amount.
Discussion on the item? Oh, please.
Again, we're working hard to be full disclosing and in full partnership. You remember in the February meeting, there was an awkward moment where we subtracted by 1.0 our FTE. And the explanation to the BET was we needed to position money for the bank rental. So we were in February very clear with the BET, and the awkwardness was the board had approved a budget to an increased FTE, and then the administration said, we are understanding the growing concerns about staffing issues. Between the budget approval in December and the discussions with BET in February, came clear we were going to be out of space at New Lebanon, had to rent additional space, We said the most effective way to do that was not to have that additional music position, so bring it from the 3.0 down to the 2.0. And we explained that to the BET at that point in this room and said that that differential was then to be applied to facility expenses, not capital but operating, as those are, for the bank rental. So we had talked it through. It was an awkward moment where the superintendent had made a shift, let the board chair and the board know, but it was to say let's not lock ourselves into a staff position long-term, find some efficiencies while we have this near-term problem. So again, we're working really hard while things shift on us to be very clear with the BET. So I just want to clarify that point as we had discussed it then. So.
And I, will admit that perhaps we forgot or whatever, but,
Yeah,
in general.
I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
I don't have a
No,
problem.
I appreciate that, and we'll certainly look more closer at that for the next budget season.
And, my directive, Mr. Brannion is available all the time to meet with any number of you. He's doing that. We need to be very close on a lot of issues, especially as we head into this next budget year.
Yep.
We have already begun planning for the next budget year, knowing it's going to be a tight one for us. Yep. So we really got to work closely.
And I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, I should note that Mary Lee Kiernan and I are meeting with Ben Brannion, and I have perhaps Bill, maybe you're attending, and Jennifer, tomorrow morning to start looking at the budget for next year and kind of sharing concepts, just general thoughts and concepps. So we appreciate that effort. Okay. Anyway, we're going to meet with Ben to go through that.
But again, I just wanted to clarify that. Hope that helps.
That's great.
Further questions, comments? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. Mr. Johnson,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move PW1 from the Department of Public Works, $350,000 additional appropriation for bridge maintenance.
that's been on behalf of the Budget Committee. Committee report.
Mr. Chairman, roughly $250,000 is budgeted each year for annual bridge maintenance. Bering Hill Road Bridge was one of those items in this current fiscal year. They had expected repairs of about $20,000, but upon further inspection, it was determined that repairs were far more extensive and would cost about $350,000. The committee had a number of different questions. We kind of questioned the precedence for bringing in additional appropriation so early in the fiscal year, this being the first month of that new year. But in the end, the Budget Committee better understood the special circumstances surrounding that needed extensive repair. The committee voted 4-0 to approve and forward to the full BUT.
Discussion. Mr. Raymer.
There's one piece that I probably should have raised at the time of the Budget Committee conversations. I don't know if there's anybody that can respond to this particular item. I think it is a piece of the expense here that this is a bridge that falls within a designated scenic road. The process, as I understand it, is to avail the town availing itself of a state statute that allows residents along a given road to petition the town for inclusion of a street as a scenic road. This was done some years ago by the residents of Bering Hill Road. I believe there's 5 streets in town that have that designation, if I understand correctly, Bering Hill being one of them. And I think there is a small element, perhaps you could assist me, of the expense which is a result of the designation of this streetscape, including the bridge as being a scenic road. If this were not a scenic road, do I understand correctly that the expense might have been a little bit less?
I'm not aware of that. We definitely are. We went to planning since we've seen the committee. And Jim and I discussed this morning that they want us to have a public hearing. So we'll go to the public and we'll see if they have any concerns. Our goal is to make this bridge, put it back the way it looks exactly. And we're going to even take the stones off the parapets and pour concrete parapets because you have to meet new strength codes. But we're going to have the stones on the outside, and we think it'll look exactly the same. We don't expect any objections because of that. The cost you're talking about, Jeff, I don't know. That might have been some extra landscaping that we offered that we don't have the plans done yet. It could be something like that, but it can't be that expensive.
From my limited understanding of it, I believe that once a street like this has been designated, it creates a responsibility, an obligation, really, of the town that when it does work on the features that belong to the town, meaning the roadway and, in this case, the bridge, the town has an actual obligation to do any work that it's doing in such a way that it restores or maintains the scenic quality of the road that has been so designated. There's been concern expressed within the BET from time to time as to decisions that are made by various bodies in town that have the result of producing additional town expense, and there are items that the BET never sees or passes on. This is an example of it. It's not an important example. It's just a small example of it. But it's worth the full board recognizing that we do our job in the context in which not all financial decisions are truly made here at the BET. Some of them are made elsewhere.
Well, we'll get input at the hearing, and I'm sure there'll be some discussion. We're actually taking the stones, as I said, we're going to bring the stones back. I think everyone would expect us to do that. It's not a great additional cost to do that. Actually, the stones will fit quite well. That's where they were, essentially, you know. It might have to be broken up a little differently, but you'll see the same face of stone that you see today.
Mr. Goldberg?
Yeah, if I recall the conversation at the Budget Committee meeting, someone went out to inspect the bridge. It's, what, an 80-year-old bridge?
About that, yes.
About 80-year-old. And it was just some minor damage. And just a few months later, 3 or 4 months later, someone went back and found that it was in dangerous shape, or to the extent that there is only that one of the lanes has to be closed off now.
We have closed one of the lanes.
Closed off.
Posted it for trucks. There's a load limit on the trucks.
Right, because it is in such dangerous shape. You can't have cars in both lanes on the bridge at the same time.
Right.
So who did the inspection to begin with? Was that a consultant brought in from outside, and how could they miss
We had
something?
a consultant that was doing quite a few of those, you know, our smaller bridges, who did that. The way it went was that there was a period of about almost, by the time we scheduled it and got out there to do it, we started doing the work on the bridge. And when they started uncovering the area that they thought was going to be, you know, concrete patching, you could see some of the bad spots, and they started uncovering it, it was just much more extensive. And when the contractor was doing that, he saw a lot more than the inspector saw, because you don't typically start tearing the bridge apart to see what's on the inside. Nor would you spend thousands of dollars on the non-destructive testing, which we've done now. Once we saw that deterioration you could see on the edge of the slab wasn't just there, which typically it is sometimes, it went into the middle of the slab, and the whole slab it's gone.
So you're saying that the inspector didn't miss it? He wasn't capable of seeing it?
Yeah, he really did what probably was expected for a first look-see. The contractor had the advantage of taking things off to get ready to fix it, and he said, there's no end to the soft concrete. Where do I start? You know, where do I stop? So that was when you do reach those stages where you do get a better look at the bridge. It doesn't happen that often, but we've seen it happen before. We try to be cautious with that.
Thank you. Roland, fund balance or capital and recurring? You're going to take this out of capital and recurring. Is this one of those appropriate? There's no reimbursement from the state on this bridge or anything, right? I don't believe so. This is just ours.
It might have a small grant, but we want to expedite this thing.
I got you. Okay.
And we got limitations now in the 10. I think we're up to maybe 20% grant. I don't think we can slow down to do it. If we could get it in while we're doing the work and still qualify, we'll try to do that.
Okay.
But
No,
the most important thing is to get it open again. It could get worse.
Okay, so we're just planning on right now capital and recurring.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So did I hear him say that you will put in a request, because 20%, that's $70,000? Right? How much would it delay? And is there any provision for bridges that are in dangerous condition?
Well, it also, I haven't looked into that question, because it also requires that you meet certain conditions. So we're going to have to fill out an application, and they prioritize the list. So it might be funded, but it might not be immediately. But we will look into that. I didn't have a chance to talk to Jim about that today. It's sort of an urgent project right now, so we focus more on getting this hearing done and then getting our design done. The schedule is to do this bridge this fall. We're going to try to start it in September, fast track the design, and get it open before winter. And we think that's important. The grant is important. If we can qualify for that, we'll do it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to prolong this discussion, but, I think in the discussion on Tuesday night, again, we have 75 bridges. Are there any other bridges like this one of similar age that you might think, if you took a closer look, are also dangerous in this town?
Well, the engineering group has been doing a lot of inspections, more so than we ever have. They're doing, as you see in the budget, or you saw this year, 10 bridges that we're looking at for fixing up. And as we do become more aggressive with the fixing up, you do start to notice what's bad and what's just a little bit bad. So I think we're being more proactive on that side. And I think with time, we're going to find, we also were talking today, even as recently as today, about some of the, not the $5,000 pieces of equipment, but some of the simple things that the DOT inspectors use. You just scrape off the asphalt and you check your concrete with simple devices. We're thinking about buying some of those for ourselves, so we might get better at some of this stuff in advance. And, I don't think we have any dangerous things out there, although this will be a pretty good example for us of what, when you look at something, what it could look like and what it could really be like after you start getting into it.
Dave, thank you for all the information. I mean, the one thing that raised my interest here was this is we'll call it a major east-west road between Round Hill Lake and then obviously onto North Street. Is it a correct assumption that fire trucks can't pass over this bridge at this point in time, the way it's been described in terms of weight?
Yeah,
or
I believe the chief is aware of this, and I'm sure Jim made him aware of it. Yeah, we're not going to want to see a fire truck on that bridge, so that's why it's urgent to get this thing done.
Right.
I don't think it really blocks them. There's some other roads that get you around there.
It's difficult. I mean, I'm
it's not
very
as simple.
familiar with
You're
that part of town because I lived out there.
There's quite a few people that come from west to east. You got the
Right.
Montessori School right there. There's a lot of things going on there every morning.
Thank you. Again, particularly concerned about the, fire equipment getting through. I mean, obviously inconveniencing Parkway or
I'll talk to the chief again. I know he understands we got to get it fixed, but he often argues with us when we try to close bridges that he's really worried about. So he didn't raise that objection this time, so I think we're okay. But we're going to do it as quick as we can. We told him that.
Thank you.
One more question. How you doing?
Good.
You look good.
Doing good. It's good to be
I don't
here.
know how many people know you, how much you went through, but you look really good. Really good to see you back with us and going it down.
Enjoying it, too. It's good to get back.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. That moves us to item number 4 on our agenda, Assessor's Report. Sorry for the long evening. Good evening.
That's okay. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. I would like to present the Assessor's Report for July 2014. I'm sure by now you have all received your July tax bills. And to date, the new bills and the transition of the new billing system has gone quite well in our office. To be honest, we have had no concerns with the new bills. As a matter of fact, people have said that they're much easier to read and understand. So we'll be continuing to process any questions and prorates through the end of the month. Our project this week happens to be becoming a bit substantial in the sense that we are now currently upgrading the ProVal CAMA system, and that's the system that we actually use to value all our real estate here in town. We have, as I mentioned before, we have 5 iterations in which to go through to make sure our data starts and comes out with the same valuations at the end. Hopefully by the end of the month we will have this up and running. We then have, and this is something that kind of came to light the other day, we have about 68 users in the town that look at our ProVal system. So we're going to have probably a bit of a learning curve that we'll have to help other offices with as well. But hopefully by the end of the month we'll have completed this. Okay. Anybody have any other further questions?
I think you might mention that the department is proceeding with at least instituting the revaluation.
Well,
Small
yes,
project.
Small we did put out the RFP for the revaluation of 2015. It's in the report. At this point, we have 3 bids that came back. They were due July 11. We are in the process of going through the purchasing procedures. We have to evaluate these, and in the next couple of weeks, we will be inviting probably all 3 companies back to actually have interviews and answer questions for us.
Oh, boy. I'll entertain a motion at the assessor's report be...
I move that we approve the assessor's report.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Harkin, seconded by Mr. Finger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Controllers report. Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Shipman. I didn't get to say hello before.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, BET members. I'll start out with the first page in the year-end closing. We've closed the books last week, and we've opened up the new year. And I've had a couple requests for the preliminary fund balance figures. So I'm going to give you the estimates. We had a very good year revenue-wise and expenditure-wise. And unaudited, we've had about a 6.4 operating surplus, which increases the fund balance from last June 30th to this June 30th from $29.3 million to approximately $35.7 million. On the capital non-recurrent side, we went from $2.2 million to about $6.5 million. On the risk fund, we were pretty even. We went from about 2.4 to about 2.5. Collectively, audited CAFR for June 30th of last year, we had the 3 of them combined were $33,839,000. And as of right now, we're at $44,776,000 collectively. That was a great year. A lot of it's attributed to the conveyance tax surplus, the building permit surplus, the FEMA reimbursements, and the insurance reimbursements. We have to keep the books open for 60 days to accrue revenues, and they do a search for contingent liabilities. Some of the bills come in a little bit late, but they don't usually impact the fund balance that much between now and 60 days after the end of the year. That's it basically. Again, the auditors will be in September, and the plan is every year, as we do, we go to the audit committee in November and have the BET report approved for December. Any questions before I move into the risk management area?
Move on.
Reported at the audit committee, Ron Lally, the risk manager, had a great renewal season. Collectively, we're looking at between $100,000 and $200,000 surplus against the budget for the 14-15 year. The 2 biggest renewals, one was a surplus, one was a negative. As reported to the audit committee, the liability account, liability insurance policy was aggressively bid out, and we had a surplus against budget of $263,000. Negative is the property insurance policy, looking at about $121,000 against the budget. However, the reason for that is we're putting on Project Renew, we're putting on MESA, and we're putting on the Central Fire Station, and we have large builder's risk policies built into the property insurance. Overall, as I stated before, we're looking at $100,000 to $200,000 surplus on the insurance renewals. Moving down, one of Mr. Ramos' currently popular subjects is the Medical Reserve Corps. As promised, we went out and we got a quote of $1,760 on this policy. We did, Mr. Lally got the particulars on the policy renewal, and we did go out. This was also discussed at the audit committee meeting, and collectively, although it was not formally approved, there was no recommendation coming out of the audit committee to purchase this policy. So I'll stop right there before I go farther into the controller's report. Did we meet these requirement that you wanted to get a quote?
Yes, Mr. Minarski. I mean, it will be my thought to raise the issue further with the full BET. I do thank the audit committee for having considered it. I'm sorry the audit committee doesn't favor the solution, but I will be looking to the chairman to bring the matter for consideration by the full BET at the appropriate time.
Very good. I'll move on to page 3 in the internal audit section. Another item that was addressed at the audit committee, there was a request to maybe have the internal audit staff do a review of records that existed maybe 40, 50 years ago that were relative to dumping at the Greenwich High School. And I'll bring your attention to the bullet in the quotes. This is word for word the FOI request. The finance department, this is considered non-permanent records, gets permission from the state of Connecticut. There's record retention schedules that allows us to throw away non-permanent records. Such non-permanent records could be a payroll check, a check register, it could be a purchase order, requisitions, et cetera, et cetera. The originals were disposed of with permission from the state of Connecticut. However, they did microfilm a number of items back in the 60s and 70s. This Freedom of Information request was turned over to the law department, and the next step is, well, the first step was the law department responded to the Connecticut Hearst Media, who sent this request, and we are meeting. The request was sent to the first selectman, to the comptroller, and the public works director to meet collectively Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the law department on how to proceed. As I've stated, they did microfilm these records back in the 1960s and 70s, and although they're outside of the finance department, they're having difficulty finding a full set of microfilm to cover these. This is a broad FOI request. It doesn't name vendors. It's not specific in its request. So we need a strategy moving forward on how to satisfy this FOI request. One of the things they did when they microfilmed was they didn't index. They filed by check number, so it's very hard to try to figure out without specific vendors to get the proper documents. We go through tens and tens and tens of thousands of purchase orders and requisitions every year. So if you multiply that time 2 decades, you're in the millions of records. I'll just stop there before I proceed further.
All right. I'll bite in this one. Peter Rowland, okay, so I know how things work today. We have the meter system, and I know how our records are kept now. We have new vendors. And how did the town do things back in the 60s like this?
I wasn't here in the 60s.
Okay. All right, so let's try it another way.
How Roland was.
What?
As I said, they microfilmed everything. What we do is we get permission. Back then, it's somewhat similar. As you just photocopy it. It's just different technology these days. We get permission from the state of Connecticut to throw originals away. Otherwise, you'd fill up this room maybe 10 times with the original records. Back then, they would put everything, it was, I guess, was administrative services maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago? They microfilmed it to archive it. And whenever I don't believe we've ever had a request that went back this far.
That's not my question. What system did they use? They didn't have QuickBooks.
No, it was a homegrown
Handwritten check
written on a mainframe.
Not in the 60s, it wasn't.
Sure it was.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, does the scope of the FOI request say what they want? Receipts from trucking companies or what?
This is it. It's what's in here in quotes is the actual via email FOI request.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Goldrick.
I guess maybe another question here, because what they're getting at is what the Board of Selectmen considered at their recent meeting. And I had to leave before they voted on this, but according to Ms. Kiernan, they voted to that they will request of the BET that we somehow investigate whether there are PCBs that were dumped in other areas of the town. So AECom appears to have been able to find out the source of the PCBs that were used in the landfill at Greenwich High School, and that was from, the early 70s? So if they were able to find that, then instead of looking at it from, what kind of systems do they use, they might be in a position to be able to find out if this material was dumped anywhere else. We keep hearing stories from people in town who are around who saw stuff dumped in different areas of the town. Now we see, according to Greenwich Time, that the Army Corps of Engineers has found PCBs in the silt under Greenwich Harbor. So clearly we know it wasn't just one area. So I guess the first question is, am I correct that the Board of Selectmen are going to make a request of us in the next couple of months to do this? Second thing, I guess I agreed. I was at the audit committee meeting. I think Ron Lally and Pat Marinon are not, they don't have the staff and they don't have the abilities, I think, to be able to go through this extensively. But perhaps an outside firm, especially someone like AECom, since they know us well, might be in position to be asked to take up this task.
I have no request from Board of Selectmen for anything. So I wasn't at the select.
I could.
They know where the contaminants. I'm sorry, if they seem to, according to Mr. Goldrick, they know where everything came from. Can you get us something on that? As for, so you have to be involved in this FOI request, right? I'm still trying to figure out what records we had at that time. And the method of our record keeping it would even be more of a question.
As I stated, we don't retain originals in the finance department, but now we digitally archive everything.
So
if this was recent, if this was let's say it was 15 years from now, this happens, and somebody wants to come back 15 years, it'd be a snap because we index everything and can immediately go to it and find it.
You have search engines.
But it was not the technology wasn't there in the 60s and the 70s, and we don't know if we have a full set of documents, microfilm. And again, if you're looking at the FOI request, I wouldn't even know where to begin to look with this type of a request. I mean, are we looking at every trucker, every hauling firm that existed in the 60s and 70s? We can't Google. I don't even know if we can Google yellow pages from the 60s, 70s. Maybe you can, as to who did this, or was it even the Public Works Department back then that was hauling this stuff? So as far as the strategy moving forward to honor this request, we're meeting in the law department Wednesday at 3 o'clock to figure out what the next step is. I'll report back to you on that. Okay. And I'm surely I could follow up. Let me just stop for a minute because I think Leslie wants to respond to.
Okay. My other point is, again, I wasn't at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, but so purchasing would have all of this, right? That what the board of Selectmen seem to be talking about is all those records are under purchasing, right?
They are, yes.
And they report to the board. They've reported to the Board of Selectmen anyway. So for the Board of Selectmen to want anything, they have it. They're the appointing authority for the purchasing department. If there is that stuff, I do. I'm sorry.
And I could follow up on Sean's request and get back to the BET as I'll get back to the BET collectively on the results of where we're going with this FOI request.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen one this broad going back 40 years. I mean, it's just more than 40 years. Ms. Tarkington?
I was just going to add that AECOM certainly has tested extensively and knows what chemicals are in the soil and at what depths, but I was not actually aware that they had as much information as perhaps Mr. Goldrick is suggesting. I think there's been a lot of contemplating about many things, or just exchange of chatter, but I'm not aware of the detail. And in fact, and even as we've done some of our work on MESA, we've had surprises in terms of the weight of the soil or so forth and so on. So we knew what was where, but perhaps it was heavier construction materials in there or whatever. So I'm surprised that Mr. Goldrick would say that they have this much information. They may, but I'm not aware of it.
If I could respond very briefly.
Hang on, Mr. Reamer had his hand up first. Mr. Reamer.
Just to confine our attention back to what's actually before us, which is this Freedom of Information request, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you're going to be meeting next Wednesday with the law department, because this Wednesday, because it is not obvious to me that the FOI requires that we conduct a search of millions of documents and we do the extraction and take responsibility for the extraction. It may be that the law department advises you that you meet your obligation if you give them access to the raw material and that they can spend their time reviewing microfiche or microfilm images of millions of documents and do the designation of what they want copied at their expense. So, don't jump to the conclusion that you have to find the manpower to do this extraordinary review. It may be that all your requirement is for you to make available to them the raw material, but the law department, who's very skilled in these FOI issues, will be able to advise you much better.
Okay, moving on. Retirement.
Couple quick points.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, Sean had it.
Yeah, just one thing. I seem to be one of the few people in this room that still reads Greenwich Time, I guess. But they did an extensive thing a few weeks ago and
Justin,
quoted.
he said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He said that.
and quoted from this 400-page report that AECOM prepared for us, where in that report apparently they stated that the source was the incinerator at Holly Hill. So I guess getting back to this FOIA request and the Board of Selectmen, they did vote. I guess this request will come to us at some point, and the point of that is to find out if perhaps these carcinogens or people are being exposed elsewhere in the town to these carcinogens, and people's health might be in danger. So my view is that instead of saying, well, we've got millions of documents, if we can go through a competent authority like AECOM and find out how they did it and see if they can have a roadmap to finding out if there are other areas that we should be concerned about, that for the sake of the public health and the health of the people in this town, we should be proactive in that.
Moving on.
Couple quick points, then I'll open up to questions. At the bottom of page 3, the retirement board, like the general fund, did have a very good year. It's from $333 million to $385 with a 16.7 return annually. 12 months, 6.7% over the last 12 months, and it's 11.6 for the previous 5 years. With the annual contribution in July, that fund is now over $400 million. OPEB also had a great year. They had appreciation of over $3 million, and they returned 14.88%. And finally, this is an update in the Human Resources Capital Management System. The last paragraph, we were going head-to-head with ADP on a battle of them telling us what bank to use, and I reported this to the Investment Advisory Committee and to the Audit Committee. They backed off, and they're going to allow us to use a local qualified public depository. And as it stands right now, it's Bank of America. So we got over that hurdle on the Human Resources Capital Management System. I will open it up to any questions in the Controller's report.
Thank you.
I'm
I'm sorry.
Can I just say one I think this is the right place. The flash report, Pete, it's changed its format, and I was wondering if, perhaps you could, for our September meeting, have it sort of restylized with the details of our, private equity investments, both equity and debt, to have the details of each of those, and a report more similar to the type of report that we used to receive, rather than summary report.
I will bring it to the attention of the chairman of the retirement board.
Okay, thank you.
Before I make a motion to accept your controllers report, I have a letter here dated June 13th to me. Please notify that your comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 13 qualifies for a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. It goes on to say Peter Minarski is controller, and there'll be an award coming. It's about 8 weeks out. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I reported that last month, and
Yeah.
I just I couldn't get it in time.
We didn't have the
before.
correspondence.
And again, it's kudos go to the Roland Geigers and the Mary Wozakowskis and the Kathleen Murphys. It's a staff effort to put that document together.
Wow, congratulations. Very good.
Good job.
Thank you.
Very good.
Motion to accept the controller's report?
Seconded by Mr. Raymer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, item number 6, acceptance of the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. Item number 7, standing committee reports. Investment. Did you have anything, or your items are later?
Right, the Investment Advisory Committee has 3 items, but they are the last 3 bullets under new business number 10, so I propose to talk about them then, if that's okay.
Fine. Human resources? Special?
Just a quick comment on the town's renewal of its medical plan for calendar 2015. Discussions are underway for the renewal of the plan. This process is being overseen by the Healthcare Steering Committee, which has representatives from HR, Labor Relations, the First Selectman's Office, and Finance. Mary Lee Karen and I also sit on this committee or attend the meetings. It's anticipated that the 2015 funding arrangement will be structured similarly to our current policy, and that the increase will be within the budgeted number for fiscal 2015. It's anticipated that this renewal will be finalized by September.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else, policy procedure we have later. That's why I didn't check. Okay, item number 8, CD block grant. Mr. Drake, Mr. Goldrick.
I'll chip in, and Mr. Goldrick can add if he wishes. The community development block grant process is working ahead successfully. You saw earlier in this meeting on CD1 was the application of $105,000, which is monies left over from last year and receipts in excess of what was budgeted last year. So we all made a decision to put that money promptly to work. For program year 2015, the part that we're looking forward, the fiscal year that's ahead of us, the program year that's ahead of us, it's expected that the grant will be $700,000. 20% of that is typically allocated for administrative costs, and then 15% for public service uses and 65% for capital uses. All of the community development block grant money is used for the economically needy, so the decisions that are made here provide real benefits to our community. And the committee is a large committee of 20-plus people, and we fan out and examine every proposed recipient of the money, and that process has been completed. Sean and I made a visit together of one of those uses, and so the committee, having made its meetings, has come to consensus on a whole list of the application of that $700,000. Princess Irf can give us the list, but the minutes of the CDBG committee are in your package, pages 20 to 24. So process is working forward satisfactorily and gets completed with a public hearing in August and then final approval after that.
Very good. Mr. Goldrick?
Mr. Drake made reference to the minutes of that meeting, and if you see them or read them, you'll see Goldrick proposes 50% cut in item after item. I'd just like to explain that.
All right. Which Goldrick?
That the evening was dragging on, and I made motions just for one item after another so we could move the discussion forward and move to a vote. So it wasn't that I wanted to slash the budget for all of these excellent organizations, if you read this.
Justin?
But I did make one suggestion through the first selectman, which is that for this block grant, of something to consider, the town, it says the town may use up to 20% of the block grant for the administration of the program. For a $400 million budget, it doesn't register that much with us. But in terms of the needs of these organizations in the community, it means a lot. So I put forward the suggestion that we consider allocating some portion of that from administration to the actual needs of these organizations. And I think that's under consideration.
Good. And if I'm not mistaken, the committee finishes, it goes to the office of the first selectman. I think Peter can modify it. He'll have a public hearing, and then it'll come back to us on our September agenda, if I'm not mistaken, so be prepared for that. Thank you, gentlemen. Education, Ms. Kearney, you one of us want to do something on the teacher contract update, or?
Sure, not a lot we can say at this point with an ongoing negotiation, but we've been meeting with the GEA, and we have several more scheduled for the rest of August. We have one, I think, at the end of July and one during August, and we've enjoyed the conversations so far.
Yeah, that's been going along. As per state law, that contract needs to be completed by October 1 for a July 1 start. So there's sort of some statutory limitations in that. But that's moving along. Item number 9, Mr. Norton, Nathaniel Witherell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have scheduled with the Department of Public Health the inspection on Wednesday morning, and if we pass that and the permit is issued, then the project is basically complete and we can begin occupying the 41 rooms that the inspection is for. We did a dry run this morning. Everything seemed to go very well. The fire alarm systems work, which was an issue we had one other time in one of the other inspections, and if we're satisfied and get our permit on Wednesday, then we'll begin the punch list process, and the project should be completed in full by the end of August. That's all I have to report.
Wow. Very good. MESA Building Committee, Ms. Tarkenton, you had a report submitted, correct?
Yes, I did. The MESA project is approximately 36% complete at this point in time. The steel for the auditorium structural frame is erected and nearing completion, and the crane will be demobilized by the end of July. This is, the project manpower is about 35 or 40 people now. This is a very, really interesting time to see MESA because the structural frame is there and you see the magnitude and the structure of it. So I'm going to email out to the BET probably sometime tomorrow to see if we can set up a tour of the site, probably the middle of next week. It's better sort of after 2:30 in the afternoon because of safety concerns. But, I think currently the masonry walls are being built on the east and southern side, but still the whole project is very visible. we should get the orchestra seating slab on grade completed in September, so expect the building committee will be back for the release of conditions. I guess we have a couple that probably will be looking at the FF&E and the Phase 1. We've been preparing the various and sundry reports that are needed for that. The details of the cost reports, the contingency, the FF&E. So I expect that will happen in either September or October, just depending on that aspect of it. And then, it's really heartwarming, or that finally we're out of the ground and the project is truly ramping up. So in light of that, the building committee has had three meetings in the month of June on the governance of the committee, with looking at all aspects, because it's going to take substantial more work by all parties involved. The building committee, which is already attending to many details, the BOE staff, Turner Construction, and Perkins and Will, in terms of all of the work and the drawings and RFIs and so forth that they need to address. So it's an extremely busy time for the building committee. We're now meeting every Tuesday at 7:30 in order to accommodate this ramp up, and so that's not always so easy. Also in the summertime, when people want, and some of them really deserve, vacations, because this is going to continue throughout the fall. But anyway, I will be emailing you tomorrow to see if we can come up with a date that meets schedules to go over there and see MISA. It's an enormous project, and it's an amazing project.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask everybody, when you get that email, to respond. Obviously, I believe that you can't go in there until after the workers are done, so it's probably a late afternoon, early evening kind of?
No, probably around 2. I mean, the most concern is really the steel workers working up high. So once they move out, which is earlier in the day, tours, we can work around some of the other workers on site. So we'll try and work out something that accommodates most members.
Good. Okay, item number 10, new business. Ms. Weissler, you have the first item.
Sure. The HR committee voted 3-0, with Bill Drake absent, to recommend to the BET that the registrars of voters' salaries be set at $35,040 for calendar 2015 and 16. This represents a 2.5% increase compounded for 2 years. In addition, the committee recommends that the registrars both receive a stipend of $1,500 each for a primary beginning in 2015. The registrars work part-time. Each is accounted for as a 0.5 in the town's table of organization. The registrars had requested an increase of 50% or $15,000 in their compensation, citing several factors. These factors included the increasing complexity and time demands of their jobs, given new state mandates. They also believed that their compensation was at the low end of the range compared to their peers and to other elected officials. They also noted that they have introduced a number of significant cost savings measures for their office. The committee was very appreciative of all the data that the registrars prepared for its review. The HR committee met in June and July to review the data. The committee noted that there is a very wide range of compensation among the peers. However, the Greenwich registrars are part-time, and therefore their compensation must be judged in this context. The committee also noted that the Greenwich registrars have done an outstanding job in using technology and other measures to reduce costs. The BET had approved, as you recall, an increase of 2.5% for M&C employees who demonstrated exceptional performance. The HR committee concluded that the registrars should merit the 2.5% increase for the 2 years. In addition, the committee is recommending a stipend of $1,500 for each registrar for a primary. Given the increasing availability of funding for state and federal primaries, the registrars anticipate an increase in the number of primaries. Throughout Connecticut, many towns provide election and/or primary stipends. Both Westport and Darien provide stipends of $1,000. Given that Greenwich has a larger number of polling locations in these two towns, the committee thought a stipend of $1,500 was fair. Therefore, I'd like to move the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation accepts the recommendation of the Human Resources Committee as detailed in the above-noted report of the Chair for the compensation increases for the Town of Greenwich Registrars of Voters for calendar years 2015 and 2016.
And that is on behalf of our Human Resources Committee. Okay, thank you. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That motion has passed. Thank you. Continuing on, I will call on Ms. Weissler again.
Okay. This is on M&C salaries. The town has completed its performance review of M&C employees and based on those reviews made salary recommendations for the current fiscal year. The performance review process was similar to the prior years with the exception that managers and employees agreed on 3 goals for the upcoming year. Achievement of these goals will be a factor in next year's review. In discussing the review process, Ms. Pepe noted the reviews were completed on time and were done thoughtfully and fairly. Ms. Pepe reviewed the M&C salary schedule with the committee. As you recall, at our May meeting, the BET approved an M&C compensation plan that will provide for a base increase of 1.5%, an extra 0.5% for excellent performance, and an extra 1%, or a total 2.5% max, for exceptional performance. Ms. Pepe summarized the salary recommendations for the current fiscal year. 4% to receive no increase, 20% to receive the 1.5% increase, and 76% to receive the 2.5% increase. The HR committee voted 3-0, with Bill Drake absent, to recommend approving the M&C salaries for fiscal 2014-15 as they are in compliance with the BET's approval of the M&C compensation plan. Therefore, I'd like to move the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation accepts the recommendations of the Human Resources Committee as detailed in the above-noted report of the Chair for M&C salaries for fiscal 2014-15.
That's on behalf of our Human Resources Committee. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is, I'm sorry. The vote on that item will be 11-01, and Mr. Blankley is abstaining. Mr. Blankley, if you'd like to make a quick comment why you're abstaining.
Because of the personal relationship, Chairman, between myself and one member of staff.
Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on. We did the next item. I think the next item is Mr. Drake, the OPEB Trust Board renominations.
Yes. Mr. Minarski very helpfully made the motions, and they're on your packet on page 99, to reappoint Bill Ferdinand to a term on the OPEB Trust Board and to reappoint Bob Stricker as the chairman of that board. So the OPEB Trust Board has 3 members. They're 3-year terms. They're staggered. Mr. Ferdinand's term would be renewed. It expired June 30th of 14 and would be extended to June 30th of 2017. You know, in this town, there are great volunteers who bring a lot to a lot of tasks, and these 2 who are already members of the OPEB Trust Board are both highly professional, accomplished investors, and their resumes are in your package. Mr. Ferdinand's on page 56 of the meeting package, and Mr. Stricker's on page 59 of the meeting package. So our committee voted 3-0 unanimously because Mr. Blankley missed him, wasn't there for that very minute that we did this. To reappoint these 2 to the posts that they presently hold.
They'll move the piece of paper. Might help.
That's it. Okay. So do we have the resolution on that?
The resolution is, I'll read it if you like. It's on page 99 of our packet, but It's resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation reappoints William Ferdinand to a term on the OPEB Trust Board expiring June 30th, 2017. And the second one is further resolved that the BET reappoints Robert Stricker as chairman of the OPEB Board for another one-year term ending June 30th of 2015.
Okay. And that's on behalf of our,
Investment Advisory Committee.
okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Discussion, Mr. Norton.
the only issue I want to raise is should these be separated? Because one is for a 3-year term and the chair is for a 1-year term, and it has to be done every year.
I agree. I read them together, but yeah, it's 2 votes. I agree with Mr. Norton.
Okay. So for the purpose of voting then, so we're very clear. The first one then we'll do Mr. Ferdinand. Resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation reappoints William Ferdinand to a term on the OPEB Trust Board expiring June 30th, 2017. Okay, so that's the first one. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? 12-0-0. The second one is further resolved that the Board of Estimate and Taxation reappoints Robert Stricker of the OPEB Board as chairman for the said board for another term ending June 30th, 2015. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is carried. Thank you for the use of your iPad. Okay, moving down. Mr. Drake, amendment to the retirement plan. And I will also be calling on Mr. Raymer if I'm not correct, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Earlier in this BET term, we amended the charter provisions that specify the benefits of the pension fund to comply with requirements of law. So in substance, you already did this decision, but it was found that some of the language was misstated. So it's corrected here. You can find it in your package on page 69 where certain words changed. You can see them in red line there, which really just conform to what we thought we were doing when we did this months ago. The tables of mortality don't change, but this just renders accurate the way the plan description refers to the mortality tables. So it's really a technical correction and cleanup.
Okay.
Our committee voted unanimously 4-0 to do this.
Okay. On behalf of the Law Committee, Mr. Raymer?
Yes, the Law Committee looked at this. We had the privilege of having Larry Simon attend the meeting and offer some explanation. The explanation offered by Mr. Simon was that we were dealing in some part with a gender-insensitive anachronism from an earlier stage, where the assumption seemed to be in the selection of wording that all workers were male, and the assumption further was that all beneficiaries are female, neither of which are necessarily the case. They wanted to have these setbacks on the application of mortality table based upon gender. And so rather than simply assume that the workers were male and the beneficiaries were female, the changes of language were to become explicit that where we're talking about a benefit applicable to the mortality of a male, it's at one table, and for females, it has a 1-year setback effectively for each of the categories that are involved. I agree with the report of the Investment Advisory Committee that this is not substance. This was simply to correct maladroit language. The Law Committee voted 2-0 to find these changes to be in legal order.
Very much. Does any further discussion, Ms. Tarkington?
Yes, I would like to add that the original amendment was prepared by outside counsel. In this case, Mr. McLaughlin of the town's law department did review this and commented that it was in legal order.
Thank you very much. Further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment to the retirement plan number 3, 2014-1, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is carried 12-0-0. Mr. Drake, you're still up.
Our committee, the task before us is to adopt and approve the actuarial report as of July 1st, 2013 of the OPEB Trust Fund. And our committee adopted a 6-page report on this topic, which is in your BET package starting on page 63. I'll just touch on the highlights. The highlights are that the present value of the retiree health benefits that have been promised to employees and retirees is $75 million. The fund assets are about $23.4 million now. The difference of about $50 million is a town obligation, even though it's not listed among our liabilities in our debt policy. The investment results of this fund have been successful. Mr. Minarski touched upon that earlier. So our report covered what are the benefits, what are the revenues and expenditures, what is the governance and the investment results, and what are the effects on the financial statements of the town of this fund and its liabilities. Our idea was to go beyond just approving the actuarial report and kind of give a description and analysis of the entire subject of OPEB. But specifically, we did in our committee vote 4-0 to approve this actuarial report and its discount rate, which is 7.25%, which is the same as used by the pension fund.
Discussion? Any acceptance of the July 1? Mr. Raymer?
I wanted to inquire if perhaps Mr. Drake can respond. Does our acceptance of the report also therefore accept the level at which we're funding the ARC, the resulting ARC, the annual required contribution?
Mr. Minarski can help me there, but we're not really voting on a budgetary appropriation here.
The answer, and also I think there's another report that you have to from the budget committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The answer is no.
Okay.
It was pre-funded in the year ending 7/8, and you're amortizing the net asset value. So the straight answer, the simple answer is no. But because of the pre-funding, you've already got the money in the assets. At a future date, in the next two reports, you're going to be voting on the actual ARC.
Okay.
And that was mentioned at both the Investment Advisory Committee meeting and the Budget Committee meeting. So the answer is no right now.
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee did hear a report from Mr. Minarski on the actuarial report for OPEB, and the committee voted 4-0 to accept it.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Raymer's question. Further discussion? Mr. Goldberg?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this report you have here. But if I'm just to clarify, our actual liabilities seem to be very much a matter of debate still. If I recall what Mr. Minarski said, we included the workman's compensation in this 2 years ago, and there is a question of how much is overlapping on that. There also seems to be a question of how much we should be funding on this on the state level. There are many states that have put aside nothing for OPEB liabilities. I am still confused as to whether this is something like retirement, where we accrue over time, or whether this is better to do on an annual basis. And I understand from Mr. Minarski, you can fill me in and correct me on this, that I think you used the expression that Boomershine, the actuaries, were learning this as they go as well. So what the ARC is or may be is still up in the air at this point. Is that correct?
Partially correct. First of all, the workers' compensation piece is correct. Going back about 5 years ago, when we hired Hooker and Holcomb, they came up with their first OPEB trust report, and they had a liability of $101 million. And I also reported to this board and the budget committee and the investment committee over the years that In the last 5 years, we've had a group together that consisted of Larry Simon, myself, Roland, and Allison Graham. And we've been cleaning up the data. And what we did is we brought that 101 million down to about 50 million, give or take a few million. It's a process of cleaning up what the actual health care benefits are supposed to be, and it's working with the actuary. 2 years ago, we put the workers' comp piece in there, and this actuary did not work, not the firm, but the person did not work on the last 2 years of the workers' compensation piece. It was Hooker and Holcomb. So it was new to him, and he said it was a learning experience, and he felt that within a year or two, meaning this is the first year, he can get a good handle on what the liability is on the workers' comp piece. So it's partially correct as far as the question you just asked me.
Thank you.
One other point, when we talked about the equalizing the expected return on the portfolio at 7.25%, we're doing it makes sense to have that at the same as our assumption for the pension fund, but this does not mean that we are committing ourselves to successive reductions of 25 basis points for the next year and the year after that, because I hope we're going to have a discussion about that going forward.
Okay. One more update. This report, although it was ready in April, it was presented to the Budget Committee in April, and the timing was was released that Friday when we were meeting. It's very late. The plan this year is to have this report before the BET in December. And if anyone wishes, we can have the actuary. By contract, they have to appear twice. For each contract, there's two contracts. There's the retirement contract and the OPEB contract. So if there's an interest from either the Budget Committee, the Investment Advisory Committee, or the full BET, we have the luxury of getting the actuary in for a presentation if you wish.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so our motion is to accept the retirement, the July 1st, 2013 OPEB actuary report. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining, 12-0-0. Old business, internal audit posting policy. This is an item that came up on the floor, and it's been referred back to our policy committee, policy procedure committee. I'm very sorry. Mr. Finger, I'll call on you or Mr. Norton, whoever wants to go first. Mr. Finger?
I'll start. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it was, I think it might have been the April meeting that you referred this item to the Policies and Procedures Committee. Mr. Norton and I, as members of that committee, have discussed it. And then at the last meeting of the BET in June, you had asked that any member who had any comments, questions, suggestions, submit them to Roland Geiger by June 30th, and he would forward them on to the Policies and Procedures Committee. That did occur. Mr. Norton and I met as a committee last Tuesday, July 15th, and we discussed the issue of posting internal audits onto the town webpage, or a webpage of the town. I had made a motion to post them. That failed to get the 2 votes necessary, so we were not able to reach an agreement.
Okay.
I will be after Mr. Norton if he chooses to make some comments on our meeting. I would like to make a motion subsequent to that.
Okay, Mr. Norton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we did. We had some meetings. Actually, this was actually also considered in the Audit Committee, I believe, at our March meeting, subsequent to the initial discussion on the floor. And when we finally met last Tuesday afternoon, we were unable to come to a conclusion as to what we would propose, if any, changes to the Policy and Procedures Committee. I'd like to address the issue because the issue, as I understand it, is posting of internal audits. And there's a great deal of confusion as to what audits are because there are multiple types of audits. internal audits are one form of audit. And what is their purpose? Their purpose is to test internal controls. And that's basically what is done, and that's the reason in which you always need a scope for an internal audit, because you're addressing the internal controls to see if they're those that it should be, or whether or not they need to have any modifications, or whether or not they need to be improved. And all the audits that are done by the town of Greenwich, at least as long as I've been chair, have addressed the issue of internal controls. We do not and have not done any forensic audits. We have not done any audits of specific topics addressing the substance of the topic. All that the audit committee authorizes are the internal controls, and they have a specific purpose. And this is the reason in which I believe that we were unable to agree as to the posting of those audits.
Okay, so if I can just step in, all the members who responded, thank you. I'm not talking about comments, but language and stuff like that. I appreciate it. So both of you did review sort of a gathering of those ideas, correct, Mr. Finger?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'll call on Mr. Finger now, because I believe you're going to make a motion for the draft that was included in our package.
Yes, that's correct. Everybody received in their packet a one-page sheet which reflects pages, the internal audit section of the Policies and Procedures Manual under the Policies and Practices tab. It's page 34, continuing on to page 35, and it appears on this one sheet. The changes that I am going to propose in a motion are highlighted in the packet in yellow. The item in the first paragraph highlighted in yellow, and in the fourth paragraph are basically what I'll call housekeeping cleanup changes that do not address or are not related to the question of posting internal audits. So I just want to make that clear. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Policies and Procedures Manual be amended to include those items highlighted in yellow on the one-page sheet that was included in the BET packet for this meeting.
I would second that motion.
Item has been moved and second. Discussion on the item?
I'd like to, if I can explain, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Norton, do you?
Oh, sorry.
What?
Do you have a?
Yes, I'm going to move to delete some of the...
Okay, hold on. We just got the item moved and seconded. And I would let the principal proponent speak first.
I'd like to explain my reasoning here. Just for the public, I'd like to read the last two paragraphs, which deal with the question of posting of internal audits, and I will indicate those sections that are highlighted. Reading again, beginning the second to last paragraph. Where there are recommendations, internal audit, together with the department head or his/her designees, shall produce a plan of action for implementation of the recommendations. After the review process has been completed, a final report with attached responses shall be submitted to the Audit Committee of the BET following, and this is added language, and acceptance of the report by the Audit Committee, the final report shall be submitted to the BET. This new added language would be the last paragraph, and I'll read that. Following submission of the final report to the BET, the Finance Department shall post the title and date of the report, as well as a PDF or other similar link of the final report on the town's internal audit webpage. All final reports shall remain posted on the webpage for a period of at least 12 months. Mr. Chairman, my reasoning for doing this is that, as we've discussed in the past, all final internal audit reports are available to the public currently. However, in order for a member of the public to obtain a copy, they have to physically walk into the town hall offices of the Finance Department, speak to the controller or the risk manager or internal auditor, and request a copy of that report. When that request is made, a hard copy of that report is then given to that person making the request. My feeling is, in the interest of, we talk about, listening to our customers, and in the interest of full transparency, is to make these reports more readily available through posting on our webpage, much like we do for many other items that come through the finance department and through the BET and those departments that report to us. Mr. Minarski, at the request of the Audit Committee in March, presented to us a one-page email memo, I'll call it, where he had done some research on other Connecticut towns, highlighted by towns in Fairfield County, as to whether they have internal audit functions, if they post their internal audits on web pages. And the email memo indicated that essentially, other than the town of Greenwich, 2 other towns in Fairfield County that have an internal auditor that essentially serves the same function as our internal auditor and does a number of internal audits for the towns, those 2 towns being town of Westport and town of Trumbull. Both of those towns post those audits on their web pages, where the public can click the link and get an actual copy through the internet of those postings and those internal audit reports. I will also point out, as Mr. Minarski did to us in an email, that the state of Connecticut's auditors of public accounts, their equivalent of an internal auditor, has their own designated web pages. And under their mission statement, there are 9 bullet points under their mission statement. One of those bullet points, and I'll read it, states, ensuring that all audit results are disclosed to the public. Obviously, with that statement, one would expect, and one does find, that all such audit reports of that department are posted on the web page. I think I had asked that some documents be distributed to your caucus. I distributed in my caucus that has a copy of Mr. Minarski's email, has a photocopy of the page on the goals and mission of the Auditors of Public Accounts, and also a couple of pages from the Westport web page where they post their audits, and that of Trumbull also. And I will point out, as I've highlighted on the Westport web page, copy of their web page, they indicate to, and I'm quoting, to provide independent, under their internal audit mission statement, it states, to provide independent audit activities designed to improve financial controls and enhance transparency. So it is with that background and the fact that we already make the reports available to somebody who physically comes into Town Hall that I've made this motion to include in our policies and procedures a provision whereby the actual audits, final audits, are available for the public to review through a link on the town's webpage.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the first comment I will make is that I don't think it's necessary to be able to receive copies of our internal audits that you have to physically come into Town Hall. But my real point is that I'd like to make a motion to delete some language in the last paragraph contained in the proposal before us. And my recommendation and suggestion is, beginning on the second line after the word report, to add a comma, and to delete the rest of the word language verbiage on that line and the first 3 words on the 3rd line, and then the language continues as is posted.
I did not follow. Do you have either? Can you print that?
I have a question. Maybe I can clarify this. So I believe what Mr. Norton is suggesting is the motion he's making is to amend my motion, which would essentially delete the requirement that the internal audits, final internal audits, be posted the actual link to the audit be posted on the webpage. That's the effect of his motion, if I'm
Exactly.
correct.
And it eliminates the language beginning on the second line after the word report.
The language that, Art, and
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong.
where's it
Well, yeah,
not?
Art.
Why don't you read your new
Read what you
paragraph.
want your paragraph to look like.
Following submission of the final report to the BET, the Finance Department shall post the title and date of the report, comma. All final reports shall remain posted on the webpage for a period of at least 12 months.
I mean, the name of the reports.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so on the amended motion, discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Goldrick.
I brought this up a few months ago, and I thought it would be a simple matter, really. I would just go back to the town of Westport. If you go to the homepage of Westport, Connecticut, you will see a list of icons across
On the motion, on the amended motion on the
Yes,
floor?
that's correct.
Okay, on the language Mr. Norton has.
That's right. If you go to their website, you will see a list of icons on there. Services, residents, so on, government. If you click on government, there will be a number of icons which come up, one of which is government transparency. Government transparency.
Okay, are
If
you
you-
are you looking
Yes,
to
I-
add that icon or that language into
I am
this?
commenting on this amendment, which has been seconded. We're in discussion now. So if you hit on government transparency, you will see a list of subjects: elected officials, reports, financial statements, internal audit reports. If you click on internal audit reports, you will see a list of titles. And you can click on any one of those titles and see the full report. Now, it's on a section called Government Transparency, and that's what we're talking about here.
No, we're talking about Mr. Norton's modification to a motion that's on the table. Now we have a motion
That's
to
right.
amend. That's what we're talking about.
That's right.
You're not, but that's what we're talking
Now,
about.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. And what Mr. Norton is trying to do by eliminating this language and not putting the reports on the website is to maintain a system of de facto secrecy, which has ruled these reports for years now. Mr. Norton sort of underplayed what these reports
Okay,
really
your
are.
comments about Mr. Norton's opinion or what he's trying to do are not well taken.
This is what we're talking about.
But I'm just telling you, they're not well taken. If you disagree with Mr. Norton's modification, you should be supporting language that you support.
Well, I'm.
The comment about Mr. Norton being de facto, we're not going there.
What we are talking about is the fact that these reports have been kept essentially secret. And what we're trying to do here is introduce some transparency, so make them readily available for the residents of this town so they can read them, find what reports are there, and have access to them. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So Mr. Norton's amendment would keep these off the website. All you would see down in the audit committee or the audit committee's website is some title, and then you have to have the gumption to go over to town hall, find out which department has this, and perhaps FOIA this thing. This should be simple. And these reports, let's be clear about what we're talking about. These reports often go into what has gone wrong with town government. It's the stuff that usually government officials don't want the public to see. But at least in Westport, they understand the importance of transparency, and they put it on the website. Their town government hasn't collapsed. So I think this is a simple matter. These reports are a matter of public record. We don't have the right to keep them secret, and we should be proactive in making them available to the public. And so I would urge eliminating or voting against Mr. Norton's amendment here.
Okay, so on Mr. Norton's motion, just a couple points that need to be clarified here. This isn't on the audit page, this is on the internal audit, right? We have a separate tab for that on the webpage, right? Just a question I have.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just
Under
checking.
finance.
We already have that tab.
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion on the Norton motion to amend. Ms. Tarkington.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Again, if I understand Mr. Norton's proposal, then I may find this acceptable, because what I believe this does is this, after these final reports are approved by the audit committee and they're submitted to the BET Finance Department, he's saying that the title and the date of the report will be posted. But in addition, as I read it, he's saying that final report shall remain posted on the web page for a period of at least 12 months. I mean, quite frankly, we have a process that has worked for many years for the BET and the Budget Committee of having the minutes and attaching reports, important reports, to those minutes. And if what Mr. Norton is saying here is that obviously in the minutes of that meeting, you'd have the comments or the any people that approve it or don't approve it would be there in the minutes, but attached to the minutes would be the final report of the final internal audit report. And quite frankly, when they are posted as minutes, they're on our website for years, many more years than just 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Again, because the minutes are there and again, for many years. So if that is Mr. Norton's intent, then, I think that this is provides the public the transparency that many on this board want to have happen, but it also would retain a process that we've used consistently for our other, our regular BET meetings and for our Budget Committee meetings. So if that is his intent, then I think this is an interesting compromise.
Further discussion? Mr. Finger?
I don't want to speak for Mr. Norton, but based upon our discussion in the Policies and Procedures meeting of last Tuesday, I don't think that was his intent. I think his intent in this motion, or based upon the discussions, was he did not want to have the final report posted anywhere on the webpage. But he can answer that question himself.
Further discussion?
The only reason, the way I understood it, this sentence remains, "All final reports shall remain posted on the webpage for a period of at least 12 months." As I said, that would be for years if they're attached to the minutes.
I think his intent was that the title and the date of the report was posted.
Well, it doesn't say that. We need some further words.
I sense that leads it to a catalog of what the items were. That it's really, the difference is whether it's a catalog of the items or a catalog of the items and the item, or a link. On a technical, not relating to the motion, I think everybody's acceptable whether it's a PDF or a Word or we don't know how, we don't know exactly how that works.
Right.
I had thought of
That's
having
right.
a lane here, so on a technical note, how it gets posted, I don't know if it's going to be a PDF or a Word or anything like that. So just as a sidebar. Okay. Further discussion on the
amendment?
Okay. All those in favor? I'm going to call it the Norton motion to amend.
So the Norton motion does not post the internal audit, only the name and the date of it.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, I misunderstood his motion.
Okay.
I was reading
So
it a
I'm
little
going to call this
differently.
the Norton motion to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I will support my own motion.
Okay. All those against?
Nay.
Abstaining. So I'm going to report that as 111-0.
I tried.
Okay. Back to, now we have the original motion back on the floor. I'm going to call it the finger resolution. How's that? Discussion on that. So I think,
Mr. Chairman,
I tried.
Mr. Goldrick?
there was just one aspect here. In the final paragraph, on the town's internal audit webpage, it seems to limit the posting to that particular webpage, where, again, I would prefer to see in time going forward a lot more transparency, perhaps a government transparency page with also our retirement pension fund valuations on there and some other things. So I don't know if Mr. Finger would like to change from the town's internal audit webpage to the town's website. If you would support that.
I stand by the motion. It's internal audit report, and I think the most appropriate place for that is on the internal audit webpage, which is a clear link from the finance department. If there's an interest in doing further postings, I think that could be a discussion at another point.
Right. Anybody who goes on the website puts search of any kind, they're going to go right to it.
That's what
So,
the public would expect to find.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, so before we vote on this item, I'd like to make a couple comments. This item came from a motion off of the floor, not on an agenda. Okay? The motion was to have the discussion on the item. The vote failed. The vote did not pass. I sensed, without being briefed ahead of time on the item, not knowing it was coming, that there was some logic. Not being secretive or any cloak and dagger, and you can quote that, Justin, with no intention of not being transparent, I sensed the same question, why don't we post any of these documents, have never, ever been asked for that. But the challenge was that night, because of the way we took this up, it was unclear to some members here of what the real request was. I will tell you that I believe that this item will lead us down to FOI issues. Internal audits from time to time do have discussions about a department or a performance on an item, compliance. And being that I'm usually accused most of FOI issues, even though I have good counsel, I would say that leads us to a caution. We must be cautioned on how we operate going forward. Most audits are always discussed, internal audits are discussed in the audit committee, and they're just in draft form at that point. But this will change how we conduct business, because the issue is, at one time, there were people who, I believe on this board, thought that we were going to post draft as they went. As for audits, I will tell you one of the things that I really found interesting is sort of an about face. I was at a meeting of one of our other large boards in town, and they were reviewing an internal audit by this group. And they read the cover page, and I had wished they had turned the page, but I found it enlightening, and that's where I said, wow, I wish more people had that internal audit to really read it, what was really in that internal audit. So that's where I actually came around. But as I see it now, the audit committee is going to have caution if there's anything that could be considered about an employee performance. There are FOI issues on that. And I'm looking at Mr. Raymer and some of our other members for comment on this before we go forward. But it will cycle, it will, if when approved, this will cycle some change and a little bit of thought process of how we go into that. But those are my comments on this. But I just want to be very clear, to accuse anyone of secrecy or not being transparent on this is just absolutely an abuse of words towards people. That's just a personal attack. No, there's been many, many BETs. We've been doing internal audits for many, many years. I think our internal audit process in the town supersedes any other community in the state, according to the records that you've submitted. So with that one concern, and I really do want to flag that concern, I was in the audit committee when we were warned by the town law department about an internal audit with talking about a performance of an individual. This goes back a ways, but so I'm actually, Mr. Raymer, I'm sure, has a comment on this. If I'm off base, Mr. Raymer, then Mr. Norton.
No, I view you on base, if that's also a metaphor. I voted against the proposal as it was brought forward in April, and will vote in favor of this one. I voted against the April proposal because it required that all audits, even though they be draft or interim or part of a continuing investigation, were to be immediately placed on the website. And the important distinction drawn here is that this is posted on the website at the point that it's a final audit, which means it's gone through the audit committee and then has been submitted to the full BET, which means the subordinate investigations, et cetera, are now done, and we're not going to sour or thwart an investigation by a premature posting, and that's the important difference. It's the reason I'll vote in favor of this, whereas I had voted against the other. Secondly, there's nothing about the language that's drawn here that precludes the BET from implementing a position on a particular audit that its posting will be postponed for some good reason, such as exactly the things that the chair was just referring to, that the audit may implicate the review of the job performance of a particular employee, which is not yet concluded, or the employee has not yet been noticed and afforded his rights to implement certain procedures. And I think the wording that Mr. Finger has picked for this was well selected, because it creates the opportunity for, in the appropriate case, for appropriate good reason, the BET can make a determination that a posting should be postponed. So for all of those reasons, I will support this and vote in favor of it at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Thanks for the help with that on that FOI stuff. Mr. Norton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If internal audits are intended to address internal controls, then there are issues that you're concerned about, that for which you're expressing caution, will not be part of the audit, because internal controls are attempting, the thrust of an internal control is to make certain that the appropriate policy and financial methodology has been implemented. It is not addressed to individuals. It can be interpreted as that performance by an individual is unsatisfactory. But the objective of any internal audit is to test the internal controls and to make recommendations to enhance them and to improve them and to make changes where it may be necessary. That may be a direct result of the way in which an employee performs. So that there never should be a situation or a case in which an internal audit is addressing per se the performance of an individual. That is not the intent and normally not the scope of any internal audit.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call it the internal audit policy submitted by Mr. Finger. It's the whole policy page we're changing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
Abstaining? I'm going to put that down as 11-1-0. Okay, next item, Parsonage Cottage update. Ms. Kieran and Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin the somewhat lengthy report with really a big thank you to the people who've been working on this assignment for almost a year now, and that would be my co-chair, Mark Johnson, Leslie Tarkington, Bill Finger on the committee, Peter Minarski, Princess Urfe, and Amina Ahmad from the Law Department. At its core, this issue is about a refinancing or a recapitalization of an entity to which we lease a town property, and it's a very dry, complicated topic, but we have to remember that the reason we're working so hard on this is to benefit the residents at this very important town facility. So all of us reviewed tonight's report, and we thought it would be helpful and appropriate to go into some detail about the work that we've been doing tonight. So I will review our process and our findings. As a reminder, the purpose of this working group was to review the original application before us, CD3, which came before us last September, which was an application by the Housing Authority requesting the complete forgiveness of a loan, and that was made using CDBG or federal HUD dollars, and Mr. Drake described some of that process a little earlier this evening. And this loan was extended in connection with a complex financing of the renovation of Parsonage Cottage, undertaken in the mid-1990s. And of course, that's a town property adjacent to Nathaniel Witherell. This financing had several other components: a second town loan made with general fund dollars, also a loan from a group of private individuals made through a 501c3 fundraising board, and a large equity investment of about $1.7 million from two low-income housing tax credit investors. And those investments were made through a limited partnership investment vehicle. The Housing Authority sought forgiveness of the CDBG loan as part of this recapitalization, and they intended to pay off the town loan by obtaining an outside commercial bank loan secured by the lease on Parsonage Cottage. The Housing Authority was assured of the forgiveness of the loan from the private fundraising board, and the Housing Authority had previously bought out those low-income housing tax credit investors. So it's a very, very complicated refinancing being contemplated here. So one thing we all need to keep in mind is, while the original funding for this renovation with a syndicate of funders like this is very, very unusual for Greenwich and very complicated, this is a complex form of financing that's really not unusual for affordable housing or supportive housing projects around Connecticut or around the country. So as a result, these loans have created a measure of oversight over this facility that is greater than the oversight typically exercised by the town over other housing authority facilities. And I think the BET and the public should also understand that this working group has kept several very important questions and principles in front of it as we've done our work. And I'll just list those three for you. And the first one is, how does the town continue to maintain an excellent facility for our elderly and provide appropriate care for these residents at Parsonage Cottage? Again, this is our most important constituency. Number two, what is the most prudent and responsible way to finance future capital improvements at this facility? And number three, how do we honor the intention of the original transaction and the original governing documents, which was to set up an operation that could fund any potential capital improvements there out of its own cash flow? So that would be without extra infusions from either the declining federal grant of CDBG funds we heard about earlier, or from the town's general fund. So this working group conducted 4 public meetings listed in the report that you see in our packet tonight in October and November 2013, February and May in 2014, and representatives of the Housing Authority were invited, and they attended, and we worked together to diligence this issue in front of us. Now, at our first meeting, we thought we made an important breakthrough. We learned from the Housing Authority that a refinancing that would reduce the annual debt service on the town and CDBG loans from $130,000 to below $50,000 would enable them to improve their cash flows and fund the anticipated capital improvements that they thought were going to occur in roughly the next 5 years. And so in our November letter to the Housing Authority, and that's in the packet, we proposed an internal refinancing of the town and the CDBG loans to achieve this cash flow. So this represented a viable financial deal placed on the table last November, and we were very hopeful about that. And in connection with this offer, the working group requested documents and financial information that are part of basic due diligence for refinancing. And we also requested that the Housing Authority work towards enforcement of the covenants contained in the original agreements. But since that time, the Housing Authority has not yet agreed to this proposal, and so we continue to work with them to iron out more details of this refinancing. And specifically, the working group proposed to refinance the town loan from 6% to 1%, the CDBG loan from 4% to 0%. We proposed to extend the maturity of both of these loans by 13 years. We continue the same amortization level, so we did not propose any balloon payments at all. It's just level amortization. And we added the ability to refinance should the daily reimbursement rate on Medicaid move unfavorably, and as we all know, that's an important stream for their revenue. This proposed deal with the additional details was again committed to writing, and you have this in a letter to the Housing Authority from May 2014. So right now, the matter resides with the town attorney, Wayne Fox, and assistant town attorney, Amina Ahmad, and they are in discussions with the Housing Authority's legal counsel, and we are hopeful for an agreement. Let me be clear about our process and our procedure going forward as well. The law department has advised the working group that after these loans are modified, they will have to be approved by the full BET. They'll have to go back to the Board of Selectmen, and then they'll have to go to the RTM for approval. And we have at several occasions discussed the withdrawal potentially of this original application, but we understand this does not represent a viable option for two reasons. The law department has advised us that the buyout of the low-income housing tax credit investors by the Housing Authority represents a technical default in both the CDBG and the town loans, and this triggers cross defaults in the related lease and the related operating agreement. So all of that will require some resolution. And the second reason is this very important question of how to prudently finance capital improvements at Parsonage would remain unresolved, and we're all very hopeful to finance these improvements prudently. So the working group has set forth all of these procedural steps in writing to the Housing Authority, and we certainly stand ready to assist them towards a conclusion of this matter for the benefit of Parsonage Cottage. And we're happy to answer any questions that anyone may have on this topic.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you to Ms. Kiernan for a very thorough report. It really does spell out all the work and effort that's gone over a course of about a year or so. Just want to emphasize that we all know Parsonage Cottage provides a valuable service to the elderly and their families in town. That will continue. We all want to reduce the annual debt load carried by Parsonage Cottage, and Mary Lee mentioned probably $80,000 or more per year that can go to capital projects. But it is our responsibility to look at the loan agreements, modify the loan agreements, and make sure they're in the best interests of the residents of Parsonage Cottage and the citizens of the town. We want to know that future cash flows will go towards capital improvements. We want the Housing Authority to be open to audits and provide us with financial information such as salaries, expenses, and capital funding each year. We want them to assure that the money generated at Parsonage Cottage stays at Parsonage Cottage. So, we're not saying that the Housing Authority is irresponsible, but we do want the right, as stewards of the town, to be able to understand how it's being managed and improved each year. So we are confused and can't quite understand why the Housing Authority is not working with us to get to this agreement and to get moving forward. Because we really do want a better understanding how Parsonage Cottage is operated and how they can provide needed capital improvements in the future years.
Ms. Turkington?
Yes, in addition to Mary Lee's and Mark's comments here, I think we all support Parsonage Cottage, and clearly, as a former board member of Nathaniel Witherall, having both of those facilities on that same campus was, very complementary to each other. But I'd also like to add to Mary Lee's comments here that she commented about the complex form of financing. And I think I'll add here that to accommodate this, there really needs to be understood that to sell the tax credits, the Parsonage Cottage property, the underlying land and the improvements was transferred into a taxable entity through a lease structure, and that the ownership of the property remains in that taxable standalone entity. The other thing I'll add is Mary Lee talked about the extension of the loan, but we all should understand that these are two loans now that have a 27-year term from today, which, clearly is significant and beyond what could be, obtained in the financial markets today. So I think that's, an important, issue that the public should understand. This is not just it's not only the very unusually low rates, but the very extended term of these two loans.
Further discussion? Mr. Goldrick?
I would just say that I fully support the efforts of the BET's ad hoc committee on this, and Mr. Johnson's comments. This refinancing is very favorable, and I don't understand why the Housing Authority would want to turn this down. I'm confused as well, and it is rather troubling, and I do support the efforts of the BET in this regard.
Further discussion? You'll hear a little bit in my chairman's report on this. I think Ed Crummick said it the best at our full BET meeting. This was a deal that the town took 2 years to put together from 95 to 97. And I think Mr. Crummick said that night, you guys are going to have to unravel it. And I don't think it was, I think he was right on point, and I think that's what's happened here now. But I think, I sincerely believe, and you'll hear a little bit in my chairman's report, I believe we will see a lot of progress coming on this. It's sometimes it's how it's heard or how it's said. So we'll see where that goes. But hopefully everything is going to work out just fine on that. Approval of BET regular minutes for June 16th, 2014.
I move their approval.
I have a motion from Mr. Raymer, seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is carried. Mr. Drake, do you have anything?
No, nothing to add.
Mr. Drake's on a red-eye flight. He's with us today. He's with us. He just got in from California. Mr. Norton.
I've said enough.
So as we're just a few minutes away from a summer break, of course, the chairman's report is probably going to equal the meeting tonight. I got contacted by Amy Siebert. There's a need for a couple BET members, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the floodplain study that we're doing down there with the Army Corps of Engineers. They're making some progress, and there'll be some comeback on that. And I think it's actually, if I'm understanding it, I think what she's looking for is there'll be some policy decisions on how we pay and all of that stuff. So I'm giving notice on that right now because of the summer break. I will be meeting tomorrow night from the group of members from RTM District 8. I know some of you have taken the time to meet with them. Thank you, everybody, for doing that. I think good communication goes a long way. The fire tower grand opening is the 1st. Okay, Mr. Raymer, I may have to be out of town for that, but I'm encouraging everyone to go to that. On a little more serious note, there's been conversation, and I just want to speak on behalf of Chair, and obviously I want to maybe speak on behalf of the caucus leader for the Democrats. There's been some talk about fund balance and the amount of fund balance we have. Obviously, we know that we picked up a significant amount of fund balance this year from the sales of the house, Nathaniel Witherell's money coming in, and also Hurricane Sandy revenues coming in. I'm going to ask the board a little bit of a thought. I'd like to get through the first quarter of this fiscal year. I'd like us to see how the hurricane season's going, because they seem expensive these days. And what I would like to do is I will probably ask the investment committee to take a look at this, to do something either part of the budget or even on an interim. I wouldn't be shy about doing that if this board chose to do it, although I'm not sure it's ever been done before, but is to reduce the fund balance and take a look at some of our liabilities and have a better impact, whether it's OPEB, pension, or something else. But I'm just asking for a little patience on that. I'd like to get through the first quarter, get the fiscal year closed out, see where we stand, and make a decision on that. One of the things, I was sitting in the Budget Committee the other night with Mr. Goldrick, and I saw the return on, what was that return? Was that OPEB? I think it was OPEB, the return on the OPEB fund that we're doing. And obviously, I think the taxpayers would be very happy if we took some of the fund balance and applied it to that. It's just some thoughts. It's preliminary, but I just want to get us out there thinking ahead all the time. Parsonage Cottage. What Ms. Kiernan didn't have in her report is the letters that we got from some of the residents from Parsonage Cottage. It was heartbreaking to think that they're being challenged, to think that their way of life is going to diminish. So I wrote a letter back to each and every one of them. And they were all different, and I invited one of the members over there. He said, can you come over and talk? I said, if you have coffee there, buy a cup of coffee, I'll come visit you. He calls my house, and he says, we have coffee. So I called him back, and 40 minutes later on the phone with him, I found out that he had half and half along with the coffee, too. So I said, I'll come over. So I met with them, and I went over and I met with 3 of the residents. I met several of them. They were so happy. And I also met with Rich DePretta, who's on the board for the fundraising of Parsonage Cottage, not the operational board. And I met with Penny, I believe, is the number one there, and I met with Tony Johnson. And you might say, I had the residents' help, and I needed it. It was a really enjoyable time. I spent a lot of time with the residents. I did take a tour, and I do believe that you will see a change coming there. But I really didn't. I encourage everyone, don't let people have a misidea that they're getting thrown out. I thought that was horrible, and I didn't like it, and I responded to it. Especially these people. One of the guys, I went in there, here's a story for you, Mr. Goldrick. I walk in, and he's sitting there, and he was grumpy like Art Norton. And he had this hat on, and it said 394th Bomb Group, and I go, were you in the 394th? And he looked at me, who are you? And I go, were you in the 394th? He goes, yeah, I was in it. I'm like, okay, take it easy here. And I go, Duxford, huh? And he looked at me, and he went to 20 years old. It was a really heartwarming story. He went right back, and I said, you had a rough September of 43. And he goes, yeah. Of course, Penny looked at me, and you should go to Parsonage Cottage and meet Penny, and she'll tell you the story. So it was a really good day, and after we were there for a while, the seniors, I will tell you, they dropped me for Swedish meatballs and noodles. They dropped me they had to go eat lunch. But they did hug me on the way out, and I went into the cafeteria. It's a beautiful place. We should be proud of Parsonage Cottage. It's really, really nice. But I thought that was, I just didn't like when I got the letters. I thought that was wrong, and I think it was really happy. So I'm going to go back there. So right now, we are a motion away from a summer break. I think all meetings have been canceled. We don't have anything scheduled. There's a few things going on. All evening, yeah, state time. And we have the tour coming up and stuff like that. So with that, Mr. Blankley.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed?
Mike, will you
Good night,
sign-
everyone.
Will you sign that? Good night.